Welcome to our Mona Lisa. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Pillar here for the biggest project we've ever done.
Ross, a full 32 pick first round mock draft. I feel this is our very first feature film. I feel like there should be a commercial coming soon to a theater near you. The Locked On Senators first round mock draft of the 2022 NHL Draft.
From the people who brought you the first Tim Stützle interview in the language of English, from the creators of the Locked On Senators account, from the creators of @SenCentral. No, we're so excited that you chose to join us and spend some time learning about the 2022 draft, but it can't just be us, Pilsy.
No.
We brought in some heavy hitters to help guide us along this journey.
Yeah, so many. A lot of them, they were part of the entities we used in our profile rankings, one of the 7. So, Ross, list off all these heavy hitters for our good friends here.
First, we will be joined by Russ Cohen, contributor to Elite Prospects and also a co-host of the Locked On Flyers podcast. So we do picks 1 through 5 with him. The Flyers pick 5th. Then we've got our boy Derek Lee from Future Sickos TV, an absolute beauty on Senators social media as well. So Derek Lee will join us for the 6th through the 10th pick in this draft. Then Cam Robinson from Elite Prospects will join us for picks 11 to 15, ending with Vancouver, where he resides. Then we'll pick that up right there with Scott Wheeler going through picks 16 to 20. And then we got a very good friend of the show, Tony Ferrari, join us, pick 21 through 25. He's a Southern Ontario guy, so we had him finish off with the Toronto Maple Leafs and then pick right back up with Jerome Berube, who's based in Montreal. He's with hockeyprospect.com, and you'll be able to hear his thoughts on who the Habs could take with their second first-round pick and all the way down to pick 30, Pilsy. And then we took the reins and we rode off into the sunset beyond that.
Yeah, this has been a wild ride. We have to thank everyone that took time out of their day to join us, and we hope you guys like this because this is something a little different, something that we decided to do just ourselves. It's not a Locked On Podcast Network thing. So sit back, get your bottle of scotch, get your popcorn, get your snacks, get comfy, and enjoy the Locked On Senators first round mock draft of the 2022 NHL Draft.
And while that intro is playing, smash the like button, subscribe to Locked On Senators. You know the deal. Here we go. It is the 2022 Locked On Senators mock draft.
Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, we are now kicking off the extravaganza that is the full first-round mock draft of the 2022 NHL Draft. And what better special guest to have kick us off than Russ Cohen. You can follow him at Sportsology. He's a contributor with Elite Prospects. He's a part of our Locked On family with the Locked On Flyers podcast. And, the Flyers pick 5th. So Russ is going to join us for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th overall picks in this draft. Before we get to it though, Russ, what's your overall impression of the top end of this draft?
So the top end of this draft is good. I don't know if there's any generational players. Probably not. Are there any superstars? Maybe one, but probably not. This draft is really good for depth, but it's also good for, guys that are going to play in the NHL. And so the top end of this draft, I feel really confident that these players are going to play in the NHL, probably play their 200 games. Hey, if some of them are second liners, some of them are second liners. If some of them are second pairing, maybe even if some of them are, if you're a center and you're a 3C these days, that's not that big a deal. Go ask, the Blackhawks. They have that philosophy. They've always told me that. So, I think that's where we're at with this draft. It's, I'm one of these people that I don't want to look at next year's draft because of the big shiny object in Connor Bedard. Because, again, so many things happen between now and then. I mean, look at Brad Lambert. So that's why I never want to always talk about anything other than the current draft because I want to wait until the end of this draft season. Then I'll start and turn the page, for the next one. And this draft is good. Is it going to be the best in a decade? No. But it's not going to be the worst either.
Yeah, and so we're going through picks 1 through 5 today, and normally as the draft gets closer, a lot of scouts have a consensus top 5. Now, do you think the top 5 is going to be kind of written in pen with the same prospects, just maybe flipped here and there, or do you think there's a lot of extras that could mix their way into the top 5 and guys that maybe are considered top 5 picks be bounced out?
No, I think there's extras.
Okay.
Honestly, other than the first pick, I don't think anything else is written in pen for anybody. I really do think some of these teams are going to be flexible depending on what the team before them does and where that player sits on their board. I really think this year there's a lot up for grabs. Doing a mock is hard this year because I've heard a lot of scouts saying, hey, I see your guys' rankings. A lot of our boards are different. And I would expect that because a guy, again, some players missed a full year of development last year. They just got back into it with this year. When you're talking about development this year in some of the leagues, because those players missed a year, were these leagues as competitive as they normally were? You have to look at that. There's a lot of different variables. So when they start looking at all those things, that's when I think you have different things that could happen. And that's when I think there could be a little chaos.
So before we put the Montreal Canadiens on the clock, you don't think that you're not buying into the debate here that we hear every year, right? Like, oh, is Laine actually better than Matthews? Turned out, no. And you can say that for all these years. There's always that late riser. It seems like this year it's Slavkovsky. Obviously, internationally, he's put out a few great performances. But for you, is Shane Wright the top class of this draft in a league of his own?
Yeah. I mean, look, ISS once had Valeri Nichushkin ranked number 1 for a short time. Just to show you. I mean, it gets crazy. I remember when I was writing for Comcast, I did a mock and somebody, and I usually don't read the comments, but somebody wrote in the comments, Seth Jones is going number 1. I bet my house on it. And of course, when McKinnon went number 1, I probably should have gone back and said, hey, buddy, where's the keys?
Yeah.
Because you just bet your house and lost.
And he ended up going 4th, so not even top 3.
Right. And but again, that's how people were convinced at the time. So the reason Shane Wright will go number 1 is because of everything he does. I did talk to Shane Wright before even the Combine, interviewed him for EP. And, when I mentioned maybe he's not the flashiest and doesn't have highlight reel goals, he got a little testy because he knows about Bedard. And he's like, listen, that's not my game. My game is I get goals when I get them. I make my players better. I do all these other things to enact winning. I am a winner, and that's what you should be getting me on based on the fact that this is what I do. I can do it very well. And you know what? I'm with him because he is a guy that makes his players better. He is a guy that brings along the younger players. He is great on entering the offensive zone. He is fast. He has a great shot. This whole thing about him taking time off in games, I think it's kind of like a little bit of what Adam Fox does sometimes, and he rushes into the offensive zone and kind of circles back to see what's out there. Where could he put the next pass? Where could he dissect the defense? Where could we get a scoring chance? And I think for some reason that is counted against him, and it really shouldn't.
So with that, I believe with confidence, I can step up to the podium and say the Canadiens de Montréal sont fiers de choisir with the first overall pick in front of what is going to be an absolutely ridiculous atmosphere at the Bell Center.
Yeah, I hope Louis LeBlanc announces him. That would be great.
From the Kingston Frontenacs in the Ontario Hockey League, Shane Wright, number 1. And my question to you here, Russ, is what can Canadiens fans expect right away from Shane Wright? Is this a guy who steps in and plays a full season in the NHL? Does he play 9 games? Or, especially because he missed that year as all OHL players did, is it best for his development to say, look, we love you, but go play 1 more year in the OHL?
Well, I think because of the development part, you give him the 9 games and you give him a real chance. You put him at like 3C. Don't put him at 2C. Don't put him at 1C like some teams do. Put him at 3C. See what he can do. What St. Louis does is he seems to get the most out of his offensively out of his players without sort of shackling them defensively. And if he kind of does that with Shane Wright, I think he could ease in there, have the confidence right away, and already start to build on things. I feel like he could do it, but when the rubber meets the road, you never know. You're never 100%. And there have been years where I'm fine with like Owen Power going back, I was fine with that. And he had a great year in college. So I would say he should get the 9 games no matter what.
The only player since Eric Johnson in 2006, I believe, first overall pick to not play in the NHL right away was Owen Power. Yeah. Of course, he didn't have the opportunity for the 9 games being a college kid, whereas Shane Wright, it's certainly a benefit. We've seen that even in Ottawa a few times. Alex Formanton most recently, Mika Zibanejad both got their 9 games after being selected. It's certainly a great tester. And not only that, but it's dangling the cherry for the rest of their season, right? They're traveling on the charter. They're going on road trips, staying in 5-star hotels. And it certainly adds a level of motivation. So Shane Wright in the short term, you see as more of a, see what you have, but don't pressure him into a full-time NHL role. Certainly fair there. And
just being in Montreal is pressure enough. Don't do it on the ice.
No doubt. And I'm sure lots of Sens fans here are breathing a sigh of relief that it's not another generational talent coming to the division. We deal enough with Austin Matthews. We don't need another one on the other side.
He's still going to be really good. I don't know if you're going to face him anyhow.
Well, maybe we'll get some good banter back and forth between him and Tim Stützle. Who's the better centerman for years to come in the Atlantic Division.
That would be good. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we already know how Habs fans think of Tim Stützle. Their heads spin around all the way when his name's even brought up. But all that to say, they're the first ever team to finish 32nd in the National Hockey League. So, you know what? Give them the first overall pick. Yeah, we'll golf clap there for the Montreal Canadiens, who you can, I'm sure, know we love the Canadiens on this show. However, Laura Saba and Scott Matla do a great job covering them over at Locked On Canadiens. They've been buzzing since the draft lottery, so go check them out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I can say the same about Trey Matthews, always full of emotion at Locked On Devils. And why wouldn't you be? I mean, this team, they're the Edmonton Oilers of this generation in terms of their luck in the draft lottery. Yeah. Did Taylor Hall really leave that much pixie dust in New Jersey when he left? They get their Nico Hischier, they get their Jack Hughes, and this year they move up to number 2. Is it an easy decision, Russ, at number 2 for the New Jersey Devils?
If it were me picking, it would be an easy decision because it's them picking. It's not because they're looking a couple different ways. I think because they haven't felt like Pavel Zacha reached what he thought he would. They're looking power forward. I think, and I don't know why you would think this, that they already are good at center, so that could count against Logan Cooley. I think they're open to a lot. And I think sometimes when you do that, then different things could happen. So they're one of the teams that I think is a bit of a wild card here, but look, they're close. If they had a goalie, they would have been really good last year. So if they get a goalie this year, they're going to be much improved, like a lot of those teams in the Metro.
Now, you mentioned that the Devils have a lot of depth at the center position. Now, if you're looking at deciding between Cooley and Slafkovsky, does the fact that Slafkovsky is a winger, does that give him just an easy edge for the Devils, saying, all right, we've got our centerman, let's take a winger that we can have complement these guys? Or do you think maybe they're taking a serious look at Cooley?
Well, I think they can talk themselves into it. I think that's really what it's about. I think when you look at it, one of those guys that we mentioned, or even Dawson Mercer, who, allegedly is a center, could play wing. So, it's not like you have to worry about this right now. You really should just worry about how talented is the guy. And, Cooley's got, I think, the best hands in traffic in this entire draft. And he gets out of trouble with his edge work and speed, and he's smart, and he plays two-way, and the kid's driven. Slafkovsky's really good too, but again, what's more valuable in this league? A power forward or, a potential 1 or 2C? Like that's, you have to look at that because again, I can go back to like the Rick Nash days, and Rick Nash was awesome, but Rick Nash didn't win a championship. That's not his fault. But again, when I'm kind of trying to set myself up for a championship run, I kind of really have to look down the middle too. I can't just say, oh, we're good because we've got Hischier and Hughes. We could go some other direction.
Do you go into Slafkovsky's answer? Do you put any credit to it that he believes he could play center at the next level? I heard him say that at the Combine.
Yeah, I know. He's been floating that for about a week. And because he played it like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Look, they could try it. The reason I never gave Columbus a hard time with Pierre-Luc Dubois is because I looked at him and he was such a physical specimen and hard worker that I said, all right, I think he probably can do it depending on how long it might take. And he did it. I don't think Slavkovsky is the same as that as far as physically. Mm-hmm. And so I do think everything else is there for him. I don't know. I have no idea how he would be face-off wise. No idea. And I don't even know if he does.
Before we get to the actual pick, is this too early for one of the two top defensemen to be off the board?
I'm sure they're in the conversation. I believe the way these teams are thinking, it's too early.
Okay, so we're going to give you the option between Logan Cooley and Juraj Slavkovsky here for the Devils.
So I'm picking, or the Devils?
You're picking.
I'm picking Logan Cooley every time.
Okay, and what would Devils fans be able to look forward to in his game?
What they would look forward to is, first off, he's a guy that is going to go to college, or he's going to Minnesota, I believe. And so he can play 2-3 years there. You don't have to make a decision in a year to sign him. That's always nice. They're looking at a guy who I think can be a 2C for sure. If he's not, if he's a 3C just because they're loaded at center, fine. No team ever loses out because they have too many good centers. Usually they're Stanley Cup teams, actually. So I look at his speed. I look at the way his hands get him out of trouble and tight. I look at the way his one-timer is, his work ethic. He's from Pittsburgh, so it's not that far away. So he would have, a good family atmosphere there, which I think is good. I think the fact that he's close, he's an East Coast guy. I think he would get the mentality of New Jersey, where I've lived for a long time, even though I grew up in New York. So as much as I know about Cooley, I am fully convinced he will be a terrific NHL player. And he also has shoulders that looks like he could put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle. There's some room, they kind of go out, they flare out, and that's good because he already does so many things well, and the speed burst on him is terrific. So you get him a little stronger in a couple of years. Again, it took Jack Hughes a little while, and I'm not saying he's Jack Hughes, but I'm saying that, hey, if he's playing behind Jack Hughes and maybe just ahead of Nico Hischier, you got a pretty good team.
Yeah, no doubt. You build down the middle, you build on the back end too, and that's where I want to get to. Right now, we've got Shane Wright at number 1 and Logan Cooley at number 2. Now, I want to ask you, and it's not saying that Arizona is going to exactly pick one of these two guys, but how do you handicap the race between David Jiricek and Simon Nemec? Because I love the war of words at the Combine. Each one of them, the confidence, they both think they're better than one another. You've got that Czechia-Slovakia rivalry there built in as well. How do you handicap their performance both now and projecting them down the road?
I like Jiricek better because I think he could be a bit of a destroyer when he's on the ice because he's got that little extra physical edge that Nemec doesn't have. I think Nemec is a little slicker in his offensive play, but Jiricek gets up the ice fine. He actually, in the World Championships, and I didn't watch a lot of it, believe me, I didn't. But what I was watching for him, he had to do a lot to make things happen on the power play to, get points. That is not a good team that he was on, right? And he was trying to do all that at such a young age. You put better players around him, and he's a lot better instantly. And I think that's something where I would look at. Nemec, I love the skating. I think his hockey IQ is really good. He didn't pile up the points at the World Championships, but again, what were these World Championships? Russia wasn't there. Yeah. They were good. They were playing against men. It was a little lesser than I think it normally would be, but still, at that age, there's still something to gain. To gain for sure. I also think Nemec at times will take some dumb penalties. He's got to sort of break out of that. But this race is really close. But I think it's pretty equal, and that's why I'm going to take Jiricek over Nemec because of that physical nature that he has.
Now, anytime you're picking in the top 5, obviously you want to take best player available, but we just talked about it with the Devils. they've got some strength up the middle, so maybe they're looking at positional wise. But if you're the Arizona Coyotes, I mean, you need help at every single position. It doesn't matter where you're looking. So with them, is there any sort of thought between them, if we're looking at our mock draft here, having Slavkovsky available or one of those two defensemen? Is there any thought positionally wise for them, or strictly let's wait and see who New Jersey takes and then we take next best player available?
Yeah, I don't think it's positionally. I do think it's next player. If it were positional, you could make the argument, because if they're going to lose Chychrun, maybe they'd want to get one of these defensemen. Yep. But again, it's kind of hard to align all of that, because what if all of a sudden Arizona gets the Tempe deal and they have money? Then they're not going to lose Chychrun. They'll probably re-sign him, right? So that's where you can sort of screw yourself at the draft if you play it too close to what's happening in the NHL today or this moment. The draft's not supposed to be for that, right? So I think they do like size. I do think if Cooley were there, they would take Cooley, because I think for the same reasons they took Keller. But Cooley's not there. So I think they're looking for a little bit of size here. I do.
So you believe that it'll be the big Slovak winger?
Yeah, I do. Slavkovsky would be their guy.
For the 3rd overall pick, the Arizona Coyotes are bringing to the desert 6'4" power forward from Slovakia, Juraj Slavkovsky. And for a lot of people, he's the most NHL ready. You buy into that?
I mean, I'm going to throw him in the Roadrunners first.
Yeah.
I am. I'm not going to throw him right in with the NHL. Hopefully, if I'm Arizona, I learned my lesson with Barrett Hayton, how they kind of screwed him up. So let me send him down with the Roadrunners, bring him up for his 9 at some point. But I want him to get used to North American hockey first. He doesn't have to be there first week. He could be there in camp. He could be there for all of preseason. Then I send him down for a little while. In a couple weeks, I'll give him his 9. But then he's sort of had a chance now to get used to North American ice and the way things are that way. To me, that's a much better way than playing at this college place with 5,000 seats with probably no atmosphere.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're the Arizona Coyotes, what's the rush to bring them up? It's not like they're like, oh, we're one piece away from being in playoff contention here. So there's no rush at all. My question to you would be, so when they draft Slavkovsky at 3rd overall, does he immediately jump to #1 player in that organization?
Like with him and Genther, like who's got the higher upside as a forward?
I think it's Slavkovsky. I love Gunther's shot, and I think he has an NHL body, and his skating's good. I think his IQ could be a little better, and I think Slavkovsky's got him beat in that area already. So I'd have to put Slavkovsky ahead of him, but I do like him too.
So are they setting up with a couple wingers there? We're just waiting for number 98 from the Regina Pats to be available next year for them.
I mean, it's not a bad way to go if you think about it.
Yeah, and he's not the only.
They're going to be in that race.
Well, he's not the only centerman next year, right? Like Fantilli, and there's a couple other centermen too. So do you think, and I know from your perspective being a draft analyst, you're only looking one draft at a time, but if you're Bill Armstrong, or is it Bill, or is he still in St. Louis? No, it's Doug in St. Louis. Bill in Arizona. Is he looking ahead at that next draft and maybe manipulating his pick this year? Like, do teams do that, or is that more just...
No, I mean, I think their thoughts are there, but I don't think they go into it with exactly that thought. I think when it's hitting them and they have the 5 minutes to think about it, it probably crosses their mind and they talk about it for a minute. Now, Fantilli, I've seen a decent amount too, and I'll say that, I think he's a quality NHL center. So, whoever gets him is not getting something where it's like a booby prize. This guy could still be a first-line center. So, either way, like you said, if you're going to say that Arizona, what do you have, like a 75% chance if you're like the second worst team or something, getting the top 2 picks usually, right, in that range? They're right in that. So this would align with that, whether they did this on purpose or not, or I'm just a genius and I didn't know it.
And, hey, if they want to stick with the Slovaks, Dalibor Dvorsky, I think next year as well, is in the mix too. But we'll save that for next spring.
Save that for next year.
Lots to get to. Lots of Slovaks, though, in this draft. We're going to get to another one here coming up. We just profiled Philip Machar on today's cast, and even this Adam Sikora kid's getting a lot of late hype here.
Well, Machar, his best interview was with Arizona.
Oh,
now
well,
they wouldn't take him in this spot.
Pick. No, but they've got more than a few picks this year.
Yeah, he singled them out, and I like him a lot. I think he had a pretty good offensive year considering he plays against men, and he's like, I could have done better. I could be better. He's got the look of a player that has some good intensity. I like his skating. So he's a guy I'd pretty much have slated for Arizona.
Oh, awesome. There's a little insider track.
Whether the other guys on the show feel that way, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, we'll ask them. No, I like that. That's a great little piece of information there. So now we've got Shane Wright at number 1, Logan Cooley at number 2, Uri Slavkovsky at number 3. Now, Russ, you know this as well as we do. There has been a defenseman, at least one, taken in the top 5 for the last 21 straight drafts. It almost ended in 2020. The Senators stepped up and took Jake Sanderson 5th overall. Here we are at number 4, the Seattle Kraken, who are as raw of an expansion team as we've seen since, well, let's put it past Vegas at the very least.
Yeah.
Are they seeing that they got Matty Beniers? Looks like a fantastic building block at center. Are they taking one of the 2 defensemen, in your opinion?
Yeah, they definitely are. And I felt that way all along because they need a first pairing defenseman in the worst way. Now, if he's number 1, that's even better. But they need that in the worst way. So, again, now I'm going to sort of think like Ron Francis and Dave Hackstall a little bit. But then I'll think like me, too. I think from their perspective, I think they would like the extra size in Jiricek. But, I'm thinking, who has the better chance of being a 1? Who has the better chance of being the 2? Nemec may have a better chance of being a 1. I think you might have to wait a little longer to find that out, though. But it's me doing the pick, so I'm going to take Jiricek, and they'll be happy with it.
All right, David Jiricek. And what can they expect him to jump in and play in the NHL right away?
I think they'll look at him, but he's another guy that, again, hey, you could throw him in Palm Springs, which will be the plummiest of plum places to play in the AHL.
Right after Belleville.
Yeah, well, Belleville's far behind. You can't walk out of the arena and go to Coachella in Belleville. I know that. I've driven through Belleville.
Fair. Oh, yeah.
They got a great Wendy's there, though. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I've sold them out of their number 6 combo more times than I'd like to admit. But all that to say, Palm Springs is certainly a great place for Jiricek. So what's his long-term outlook? You see him as more of a safer pick than Nemec. Is that right?
Yeah, he's a safer pick. The offensive upside is there. I think his skating will get better. I think his stick handling will actually get better. I think Nemec is a little ahead of him that way. But like I said, once Jiricek gets going and he gets the puck up the ice in the offensive zone, he's dangerous. He's got a really good point shot. It's not as accurate as I think it can be in the future. I think that's something else that he'll work on, and he's got a heavy wrist shot. But, he does everything else really well. He hits guys in the corners. There's some things he can do right now in the NHL for sure. The idea is, do you want him to do that and learn on the job, or do you want him to sort of, let him ease into the North American game as well? Again, without Giordano there, who's really going to watch after Jiricek like, Chara did back in the day for, Brandon Carlo as an example.
And McAvoy.
Yeah, and McAvoy. Like, who's going to do that for Jiricek? That would be my only concern.
Yeah, especially they've got a lot of UFAs coming up too in terms of their decor, like I believe Alexiak and all those guys. But I mean, when you're having building blocks, right shot defenseman's always a premium. You want to have that centerman, so pretty good start, no, for Ron Francis if it does play out this way.
Yeah, I think it is a really good start, and I think at that point you've got your number 1 center in Beniers, you've got your possible number 1 or number 2 defenseman in Jiricek. That's where you want to go.
And your potential number 1 goalie and friend of the show, Joey Daccord, of course.
I like Joey Daccord. I do.
I love Dax. He's awesome. But
I like him, and I do think there's potential there. We'll see if it works out that way. I hope it does.
Yeah, so do we.
Now, with these two defensemen, like we talked about, they've been kind of pegged together throughout this whole draft. Do you think they're handcuffed together? Like if Seattle goes with Yurchek, then the next obvious pick is Nemec? Or do you think that like there's more like are the teams looking for a right shot defenseman and it's simply a case of, okay, this team took them, we'll take the other guy?
They're always looking for right shot defensemen, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like that. They're always looking for that. And there are, probably 3 or 4 really good ones in this draft. But the next pick will be interesting because, again, when you have teams that have multiple needs, then you kind of have to like look into the looking glass and say, who is the best player on the board? Like that's the first question you have to ask yourself. Then if it's that guy too, then you're in good shape.
Yeah. 100%. Well, we always see it with goalies, right? Once one goes off the board, typically it'll be 2 and 3. It happened with Ottawa in 2019. Kochetkov goes off the board. They trade up and take Matt Sogard right afterwards.
Yeah, we've seen that. Drafts with defensemen. There's a run on like 4 or 5 in a row. It won't be this draft, but we've seen that.
Okay, so I mean, Locked On Flyers, take the floor, Russ. Like, what's Philadelphia looking for at this stage in the rebuild? You've clearly already taken the
well. They won't admit to having a rebuild, so we'll start there.
Well, whether you admit it or not, when your captain's shipped out of town, you kind of have to look to the future.
I know, but they're not admitting it, so we'll start there where they don't even admit it. Look, there's a lot of players they could use. They could use a Claude Giroux type replacement. They could use a goal scorer. They could use a first pairing defenseman. Those are the things I think when you're looking here, that's what they're shopping for. Those 3 kinds of players and by Giroux, I mean, hey, you're looking for a really good playmaker because when they lost Giroux and Voracek, those are 2 massive playmakers for them. That's no matter how bad Jake was playing at times for the Flyers, he always seemed to get points. And that's so when you lose playmaking like that, you've got to replace it. And so, I look at that. And again, they're going to have to re-sign Travis Sanheim. Will they come to terms with him? They might. If Provorov has another bad year, they're going to ship him out. But I don't think he'll have another bad year because he started playing better at the end of the year when Mike Yeo was gone, which is normal. Mike Yeo wasn't great.
And Ryan Ellis is kind of the ace up the sleeve there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen him in months. Nobody's seen him in months. I don't know what – I can't count on him for anything regardless of the report.
Syndrome, we call that in Ottawa.
Oh, it's worse than that. I think it's worse than Matt Murray. At least Matt Murray's been showing up on and off. Ellis, 2 games. 2.
Yeah,
that's not his fault. It's just the way things shook out.
Yeah. That's tough.
And what's funny is the last time the draft was in Montreal was the Ryan Ellis draft. What was that, like 2009?
Yeah. Yeah, it was 2009.
Yeah, he had no beard, no mustache. I have a picture of him, clean shaven.
Still would have taken him over who Ottawa took at number 9.
Oh, yeah. Well, he always had a bullet of a shot. I mean, that was –
oh, yeah.
That was evident in juniors. But yeah, the Flyers have a lot of needs here. So I think – honestly, I think there's – Kemo, Lekaramaki, Geeky, Nemec, Savoy. I think they're all in the conversation here for the Flyers. They should be.
Okay, well, hey, you're making the pick. So who do you have for the Flyers here? And we should shout out as well. We did for the first couple, but the Arizona Coyotes, Robin Leno does a fantastic job.
Very good job.
All over the city council meeting there as they're looking to get a team in Tempe. And then, of course, Erica Lindsay Ayala took the bull by the horns of the inaugural season that was for the Seattle Kraken. So she is all available at Locked On Kraken. And, of course, Russ Cohen with Rachel Donner are your one-stop shop for all things Flyers over at Locked On Flyers. So, Russ, you are on the clock. Who are the Philadelphia Flyers selecting with 5th overall? You mentioned a lot of names, so you got to narrow it down.
Well, I'm narrowing it down to Nemec and Savoy. And at the end of the day, they could use both. I think at worst, Savoy is second-line center, second-line winger, but I think he can play center. Some people don't. I think he can. But even if he can't, it's okay because he's been playing both. But he is a playmaker of the highest order. And then Nemec, who, we've talked about. The thing about Savoy is he's a real leader. If you heard him at the Combine, it was like listening to a coach talking about other players. That's how much he is into the game, and the hockey IQ is just off the charts. Great shot. He had that shoulder injury, and he came back from it right in the playoffs. So, He's sturdy for his size. I know everybody's going to talk about his size, but he's already a pretty strong kid, and he'll continue to get stronger. And I think the speed is kind of like people don't talk about it enough because I think sometimes it's not like the two-step quickness kind of speed, but I think it's like he gets from point A to point B because he knows where he's going to go. And that's the thing. A lot of times with the puck, he knows what he's going to do with it ahead of time. He's one of those guys that can break it down. Honestly, I'm going to take Matthew Savoie because I think that's really what the Flyers need. And I don't care about his size. I don't care about anything. Now, there's a few people in the hierarchy for Philly that definitely care about size. Danny Briere probably isn't one of them, though, and he could be a guy that pushes hard for him. We'll see.
I like that. That's awesome. Matthew Savoie going 5th overall to the Philadelphia Flyers. He's certainly a guy who I'll see back where I'm living right now in Winnipeg next year, though. He'll be back on the ice. Yeah,
he'll be back with the ice, and, just based on age and everything else. And, the ice will still be really good. I mean, they came up a little short this year. They still got some players next year. They got a player who the Flyers didn't even want, and Connor McLennan, who I like.
Yeah, he's a great player. And this Zach Benson kid, talk about the 2023 draft. He puts on a couple extra inches in height.
They'll be a good team again. They'll be a good team.
He actually reminds me a lot of Savoie, Zach Benson, who will be eligible for the next year's draft. So before we let you go, Russ, we appreciate all your insight. This has been fantastic getting your takes on as we go along here through this full first-round mock draft. We got to ask you, because Derek Lee's going to join us for the next segment with the Ottawa Senators on the clock at 7. Who do you like for them in that position? No matter who, let's say Nemec goes 6, because I think in all likelihood he won't be available to the Sens at 7. Who are some of the other names? Like we've heard Cutter Gauthier and a few of the other guys who you mentioned there, Lekaramaki.
I think Lekaramaki, Kemmel, Nazar, Gauthier will be in the conversation. Yurov, Lambert. I think those are the real guys I would be talking about. If you want a defenseman, and maybe Matt Tkachuk too. So
okay, awesome.
But I think it's a little early for him. But I think that's where the conversation is. This is assuming Ottawa doesn't trade the pick, because everybody's assuming they're going to trade the pick.
Yeah, 100%. If they can get value for it with this core where they are,
because they've had a lot of picks. We do have to acknowledge that.
Oh yeah, and they have 2 second-rounders, 2 third-rounders, 3 fifth-rounders this year. So there's certainly some flexibility there for Ottawa, and we'll be obviously following along with you at Sportsology. You can follow Russ on Twitter there, and obviously you can follow his work as well with the EP. The draft guide's coming out soon. You must be fired up for that. There's so much work that goes into that.
Also want to throw in, I've written 10 books, so you can go to Amazon.com. They make a good Father's Day gift. 10.
Fantastic.
What's your latest book that you want to plug?
Latest book is the NBA Top 75. I was a part of that because I'm not a huge NBA guy now, but I was way back. So I was like the historian guy there who saw Dr. J, who saw Wilt Chamberlain, who saw, so I'm that guy compared to the new guys. And, and I know a little bit about the new guys. So we do a ranking. It's really good. We also have eras. So there's a lot of, we rank them in eras, so there's a lot of players from different eras in there. We all give our take on certain players, like growing up, who we watched. And I was a big Dr. J guy. I actually watched the ABA as a little kid in Nassau Coliseum. So that was, that was something that was before he was in the NBA. So, yeah, that's the one. But I've also written hockey and baseball books too. If anybody gets them ahead of time, I'm willing to sign them. Just DM me at Sportsology, or I could sell you them myself.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. Before we let you go, that's your latest book, but which one's your favorite?
I'll go back and say we did one. My second book was 100 Ranger Greats. We ranked all the great players of the time, and I did it with 2 other guys. Tremendous amount of work went into it. It's like one of those really kind of grandiose coffee table books. They don't make too many of those anymore. It's out of print at the moment, though we might re-release it at some point. That was a lot of fun, and the players still really revere it. They want to know where they were ranked. They really, it was unbelievable how much they cared. And a lot of people, from a collectible standpoint, went around and got a lot of different autographs from the top 100. So, and I have some too. So it's a fun thing. So I have to say that's the one.
That's awesome. Well, everyone can go check those out on Amazon. To recap, the top 5 alongside Russ Cohen from Elite Prospects. And you can also find his work Locked On Flyers, wherever you get your podcast. We've got Shane Wright going 1st overall to the Montreal Canadiens. Logan Cooley going second to the New Jersey Devils. Juraj Slafkovsky, the first European off the board to the Arizona Coyotes, followed up by Czechia native David Jiricek, the first defenseman to the Seattle Kraken. And his Flyers are taking Matthew Savoy from the Winnipeg Ice. Now, Columbus Blue Jackets, you're on the clock.
Yeah, Ross, there are a lot of great options left for the Columbus Blue Jackets at number 6. And there's one in particular that the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to be very excited. Philadelphia decided to not select in this. And we thought both the right shot defensemen were going to go together. But the Blue Jackets, they're in luck, as I think it's going to be pretty obvious who their next pick is going to be.
And as we take it off, pretty obvious who our next guest is. We had to bring in a Sens angle, as we're one pick away from the Senators at number 7. Welcoming on from the Future Watch TV and the Future Sickos podcast, Derek Lee. Welcome to the mock draft, buddy. You came in at a great time. I think I know where we're going at number 6 with Columbus, but who are some of the names that in your research leading up to the draft are worthy of being a top 6 selection?
Yeah, there's actually, well, first off, thanks for the intro, boys. And it's nice to be on and chatting with you guys. There are certainly a lot of great options for Columbus. And it's one of those drafts where there really is a lot of variance within the top, really within the top like 12 picks. There's just a lot of different names that you can bounce around and play with. There's one obvious name on your mock draft here that we're going to get to, but I will talk about the Finnish connection a little bit because there is a definite Finnish connection here in Columbus. So I will throw out Joakim Kemell, who is, I call him my draft baby. He's just the guy that sort of stood out to me the most when I started doing my research. So Columbus would be highly interested in Joakim Kemell. He's another sniper similar to Patrick Laine, who they already have. A little bit one-dimensional in that way, but we'll talk about him maybe a little bit later on, because right now we need to get into Simon Nemec, who's the most obvious choice here. I mean, I don't even know how he slid to number 6. A lot of people project him to be even inside the top 3 guys. So the fact that he's falling to 6 here with Columbus, they're going to have great big smiles on their face as they step up to the podium and select the 6-foot, 190-pound Slovakian league defenseman. He's played 3 years of pro hockey. He's a polished player, and he's going to step almost right into the NHL. Might need one more year of development, but that's one hell of a selection for the Blue Jackets at 6th overall.
Yeah, there's a huge gap between the top 2 defensemen and the next, although it might be closing because there's certain players are having great playoffs in the Western Hockey League in particular, but overall, a couple of risers late. However, this case, it's a faller. Simon Nemec has to be the selection here for Columbus. They're overjoyed to make this pick. And in recent first rounds, they've taken forwards. You think when they went off the board to take Chipirikov or Chinikov a couple of years ago, then they get Cole Sillinger early on into 2021 draft. And I know Pilsey's rolling his eyes already. Could have been a Senator. But this year, having a defenseman in the mix there, I think is super important. Last year, they used their second first-rounder on a defenseman, Corson Kuhlmans, as well, who I remember profiling there, the former Brooks Bandit, one of the 2 teams in the AJHL, Pilsey? That we always hear about. But certainly, Columbus over-thrilled to get that. I understand where you're going with the Finnish connection, Derek, but I will say he's not married to it, as he did pass on Puljujärvi to take Dubois, Jarmo Kekalainen, that is. Fun fact for the Sens fans listening, Jarmo Kekalainen, one of only, I believe, 4 players in Ottawa Senators history to wear number 11, and it will never be worn again, as we know, retired for the great Daniel Alfredsson. Get him into the Hall of Fame, but always a fun connection there with Ottawa, with Jarmo Kekalainen. But they have to be thrilled, running up to the podium to get Simon Nemec into the mix. Now, Derek, my curiosity is piqued here. Obviously, you've done a lot of work on this draft. Where do you compare Nemec to Jiricek? Are you on the same page as Russ, who is very partial to Jiricek's all-around game, or do you like what Nemec brings a little bit better?
Yeah, for me, it's about upside, guys. I mean, with Nemec, pretty much what you see is what you get, I think, at this point. He's a lot closer to a polished player. And with Jiricek, you're really banking on the fact that he's going to be something special down the road. You're also looking at the size factor, the physicality factor, and what we call the overall toolkit with Jiricek. So he's a guy that I've always been a little bit higher on than Nemec, but I mean, honestly, they're neck and nipple. They're that close to each other. I would say neck and neck, but they're not exactly tied. So neck and nipple, I put it that way, which is something that I always like to say. My friends make fun of me for, but anyway, Jiricek is the guy that I've always had throughout the season as a little bit higher than Nemec. So I actually agree with your draft board here. So, but you know, it's no slight to Nemec. He put up 17 points in 19 playoff games to put a stamp on the 26 points in 39 games played that he had in the Pro Slovakian League. Those are staggering numbers. Those are record-breaking numbers. So you really can't put a slight on him. He's a smooth skating defenseman, great passing abilities, great in transition, great poise, great IQ, good defensive awareness. They're both risk takers. They're both modern day defensemen. So it really is just to kind of take your pick. But I've always had the preference. Certainly when it comes to the eye test, you're looking at Jiricek as a real top option for me, who's slightly above Nemec.
Yeah, I think just either right shot defenseman, if they become available to Columbus, they're going to love that. And Nemec is like, imagine him playing beside Werenski, and then their top two right shot guys could be Adam Bachfist and Simon Nemec. Like, they would love that to go along with some great scoring up front with Cole Sillinger if they keep Patrick Laine. Like, you're really starting to see a team put themselves together here. So I think this would be an excellent draft for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who really kind of kickstarted their rebuild after they went all in with the Duchesnes and the Dzingels in the playoffs back in the day. But now they're in full rebuild mode, and this is going to be a player that really helps out their prospect pipeline.
Yeah, sneaky rebuild for Columbus. It felt like they kind of did it on the fly, but accumulated some first-round picks along the way, and Jack Roslovic working out as like a nice bonus in that Laine for Dubois swap. He just got his 2-year extension at $4 million a year. So they're building a nice team. I'm a big Elvis fan in goal too. I think that when he's on his game, he's a top 12, 10 goalie, maybe even in the National Hockey League. I mean, unless Timmy's going up against, I feel like Timmy scored a couple highlight reel ones on him this season. But all in all, I think they're building a nice little squad there out in Columbus, and they're not done. Pillsy, Cam Robinson will join us by the time Columbus is back on the clock. This pick was the one from the Chicago trade where they acquired Seth Jones from Columbus this past summer. So maybe you shake your head at that trade, especially the extension that's kicking in this upcoming year. I believe it's the first of an 8-year extension worth over $9 million. So, and now if you're Chicago, now they're looking to rebuild. So certainly timing is everything in the National Hockey League, and this worked out pretty well for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who will, as we mentioned, select later. But right now, taking Simon Nemec of the Slovak Pro League. Now, this is the one we've all been waiting for. The Ottawa Senators on the clock at 7. I know you already mentioned Joakim Kemell. Derek, Pillsy, we've been seeing that in every single mock draft, hey?
Yeah, it seems like every person we've talked to, every mock draft we see, have the Sens taking Joakim Kemell. And hey, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but you and I, Ross, we tend to lean a different direction. And if this is the way the draft does indeed shake out, we could get our wish.
Oh, 100%. And in the first version of the mock draft we did for the Locked On Podcast Network, where each of our hosts have gone around, we should give a shout out as well to Jacob Forster, who's the one covering the Columbus Blue Jackets. You can go give them a follow over at Locked On Blue Jackets. Love the British accent too. Great for podcasts. So go check out what Jacob does. Great work there. And he's a goalie friendly show. So we all got to show some love.
And the irony of a British guy doing the Blue Jackets show, I mean, that's got to be pointed out. I can't just let that sit there.
Yes, 100%. Well, we can't let Cutter Gauthier sit on the board any longer. With the 7th overall pick, the Ottawa Senators are proud to select Les Sénateurs sont fiers de choisir from the U.S. National Team Development Program. Oh boy, the Sens have said that time and time again on the draft floor, and the most recent time right here, taking Cutter Gauthier. Pillsy, what would you say to the haters? The haters out there who would say, this is just another big physical player who doesn't have any skill. What would you say to that?
I would say check the game notes, bud, because if you look at what Cutter Gauthier is able to do, he's got a heavy shot. He's a heavy player that, yes, he's going to have that physicality, but look at the stats he puts up. I mean, in 54 games, he had 34 goals, 31 assists. That was with the U18 team. Then with the USHL, 22 games, almost a goal per game pace with 19 goals, and then added on 9 assists. So he's still playing at above a point per game pace. So for all the haters saying that this would be just another Sens pick wasted on size and getting infatuated with high character and the US program, as the Sens tend to do, he's got the goals to back it up as well. And I don't know about you, Derek, but this would be a pick I would be very thrilled for the Sens to have.
I'm right with you guys. And, you know, a little message to the haters. Every Sens fan, I've seen this so many times, says, we just need to clone Drake Batherson. We just need to clone Drake Batherson. He fits so well on both the top line and the second line. Well, this is as close to a Drake Batherson clone as you're going to find. When I watch this guy play, I see a lot of Drake Batherson in his game. He's an extremely good skater for a guy his size. He's way underrated when it comes to the skill. I mean, when I was reading some of the stuff on this player before I went into the video, I was expecting to see something totally different. And when I went into the video, I was super impressed by his hands, his ability to get around guys, his transition ability. But if I had to character his game in one word, I would say versatile. He plays pretty much every position. He's actually listing himself as a center now, which will make the conversation a little bit more interesting for the Senators, because we all know, I mean, looking at their depth chart, I sure as hell don't see a need for a center. I don't know about you guys, but he did play, I mean, the majority of the season with the USN TDP, and I always say that wrong. He played as a winger, but he has a strong desire to play down the middle. So I do wonder if that's going to sort of implicate their draft selection or their choice on Gauthier. But man, what a good player. And of those 34 goals that you mentioned, Pilsy, just 4 of them were on the man advantage. So he scores a ton at 5-on-5, which is also, you know, something the Senators could use, because they have the Josh Norris, who basically scores 99% of his goals from his office on the man advantage. So it'd be nice to counter that with some 5-on-5 goals.
Love that stat, Derek. That's awesome. Now, again, you got to watch a lot of video on him, and he played center when Charlie Stramel went out of the lineup. He's a 2023 player, but when he was playing wing, he was playing alongside Logan Cooley, who we already have off the board at 2nd overall in our mock draft. So how much of the even strength benefit do you credit playing with Logan Cooley, or is this a guy who can create offense on his own?
You know what? To be fair to Logan Cooley, who's such a great playmaker, you do have to give him some of that credit. He was playing with Snuggerud, who's another really good player too. Like that whole line, really that whole team. I mean, it was just filthy from the top down. So I think that's why a lot of people listed him as a complimentary goal scorer. I think that was the label that he got basically throughout the draft. But I think people got to see how he can generate offense individually as the year went on. And that's why he's such a big riser this year. You know, he was kind of off. He was still inside the first round, but he was way off in the 20s earlier on in the season. And he kind of progressed as the season went on. People started realizing, like, man, this kid is big. He can skate like the wind, and he's really consistent. I mean, he has a few quirks in his game, a few things that he needs to work on when it comes to pass reception. I think he tends to bobble pucks a little bit in the neutral zone. Shot selection isn't perfect. So, you know, every kid's going to have some things to clean up, and he's got some things to clean up and work on, but he's going to probably do so playing for the Eagles in Boston College.
Do you think he goes full Jake Sanderson and is off the board by the time the Senators pick? I say Jake Sanderson as being a late riser up the draft boards. It seems like all the public lists that we're seeing had him at like 15 to 20 at the midterms. And now I even saw a mock draft yesterday with Scott Wheeler, who had Columbus taking him at 6th overall. Will Cutter Gauthier be on the board, in your opinion, when the Sens step up, if they step up at 7th overall?
Well, I think so. But you do raise a really good point. Recently, as you said, it's one of those late risers. We've seen it with Mason McTavish, right? Like he just rose all the way up to the top, and he was kind of a mid, you know, the Senators were even considering, all of us were considering him being their selection.
Derek, I was just going to say, when we did our Locked On mock draft last year, we got McTavish at 10.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is some
Exactly.
sort of bad juju where when we take a guy in a mock draft, they fly up the draft board, but go on.
Well, and it's these sizable, like these big guys. He's 6'3", 201 pounds. Like when you have a big guy like that, especially in this draft particularly, there's not a lot of big players at the top. It's, a lot of smaller, undersized players, and you're saying everything else looks good except they're 5'10" or 5'9". So, a player like this, I could definitely see him going up as high as 5'6" overall. It's a possibility.
Yeah, and I think basically the Sens are at a point where they're going to have an option to make a decision between Savoie and Gauthier, right? Like Columbus, the way it's probably going to shake out is going to end up with one of those, unless they go with the Finnish connection, like you mentioned, or like either way, I'm saying one of those guys is going to be available, and that puts the Sens in a great spot at 7th overall. And personally, I still lean Cutter Gauthier, even if it seems like he wants to play center. The Sens also started Tim Stützle on the wing, so I think they would probably start him on the wing regardless, especially if that's where he was playing majority of the year. And that's where we could use a guy. You mentioned he plays kind of similar to Drake Batherson. Well, imagine on that second line eventually in a few years with Timmy Stützle and Drake Batherson. That could end up working out really good. You get a heavy shot that Timmy and Drake can play make with. So I just love it all around. I think it would make a lot of sense for the Sens, and I'm hoping for Cutter for Ottawa.
Yeah, same here. And he's going to play center on his words at at Boston College this upcoming season. So we'll see if and how that translates to the pro level, whether he's there 1, 2, or maybe even 3 years. But I think 2 would probably be my best guess with Cutter Gauthier. So to go back, we got Shane Wright going first overall, premier choix to the Montreal Canadiens. Then we've got Logan Cooley going to the Devils, Juraj Slafkovsky at 3rd overall to the Arizona Coyotes. The Seattle Kraken taking David Jiricek from the Czechia League. And then we've got Winnipeg Ice centerman, maybe winger at the next level, Matthew Savoie to the Philadelphia Flyers. Simon Nemec to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And the Ottawa Senators selecting Cutter Gauthier. We got a little bit of a run of Atlantic Division teams now where the Detroit Red Wings are on the clock before the Buffalo Sabres. Pilsy, there's still a lot of choice. There's some best available here that we have going on from our list. And maybe I'll throw our list up, Pilsy, because by the time we release this, our list is already going to be done. Or already released. So yep. I'm going to pull that up. And then as you discussed, some best available options here that we have on the board.
Yeah, there's so many. And that's the nice thing about this draft is sure, maybe if you're picking in the top 3, maybe even top 5, you're not stoked that there's not generational talent available for you there. But throughout the rest of the draft, there's a lot of good options, no matter who kind of ends up falling to you and who gets taken ahead of where you're selecting. And I think for the Detroit Red Wings, they've got needs all over their rebuilding situation. So they're really going to be looking for best player available. And Stevie Y knows how to pick them like the best of them. And I think this might be a situation, though, where they can really focus on one of their weaknesses, which is down the middle. And there's a certain guy, a Michigan guy, who's going to the University of Michigan that I think would work out really well there. And if they decide to go a different route, there's guys like Brad Lambert. There's plenty of other options at center that the Detroit Red Wings can go for. And I think there's also a Swedish winger that has one hell of a shot from Djurgården that would also look great in a Red Wings organization that loves their Swedes.
So if we're just going based on our board, the best player available is Joakim Kamel. But then you look at the depth chart for the Detroit Red Wings, and maybe this isn't how Stevie Y drafts. You look at him as a guy who's all likelihood going to take best player available. And if you're looking at the consensus from our lists, and you have to remember that the 2 lists who aren't updated to final rankings yet are Craig Button and Bob McKenzie. And outside of Corey Pronman, they're the only ones who are a little lower on Frank Nazar, the top center from the U.S. program. Sorry, second line center, I should say, behind Logan Cooley. But what an impactful player. And some people are hating on him because he's the wrong side of 6 feet. Can he play center? Can he excel at center at the NHL level? And what I say to that, fellas, is look at the guy who's making the draft pick. Steve Yzerman was an under 6 foot center. I think everything worked out for him all right. So maybe this is us being a little, is it nepotism? Or no, that's when their dads played. I think this is more geographically enhanced.
Homerism, I don't know.
Homerism, yeah. Nationalism, regionalism. How about that? That's what we'll fly with. But Frank Nazar, he's committed to the University of Michigan. Grew up playing, he's a Mount Clement, which is right around the corner from where the Red Wings play. Probably grew up a fan of Steve Yzerman. And then you look at it just from an on-ice perspective. What did Stevie Y always make sure to get in Tampa? It was always the most talented player available. Doesn't care about position. You sort that out after. And to me, pure talent-wise, he's fourth on Elite Prospects list. So I'm going, in terms of pure talent, I think Frank Nazar is the pick here. Derek, what do you think of his selection if we're taking him for Detroit?
It's an excellent choice. It makes total sense. Of course, the Michigan connection, like you guys pointed out. Third in team scoring, 70 points. Outstanding year at the USN TDP. His skating, agility, edge work, like all of that is top notch. He's got great top speed. There's just not a ton that he needs to work on. Like when I look at his game, the only thing he needs to work on is something he can't, which is his size. Detroit's getting a point producer. This guy put up a staggering amount of points, 127 points in 55 games played with the Honey Baked program as a U15. So that is just insane numbers. He's always been a point producer, and he's always been sort of every stage of competition that he's went to, he's stepped up every single time. So I have no doubt that he's going to step up for college. And when he gets to the NHL, he's going to step up just the same. And he's such a competitive guy. That's, his biggest asset is what they call his engine. He just never quits. He never shuts it off. He's not capable of shutting it off.
Yeah, and I just think it makes so much sense for the Red Wings to try to target a center here, because you start looking at their wing and you've got Jacob Vrana, you've got Lucas Raymond, you've got Tyler Bertuzzi. I mean, Philip Zadina, he's supposed to be filling nets with pucks, but he hasn't quite started that yet. But it seems like they've got some high-end talent on the wing. Now they just need some guys that can play with high-end talent. And Frank Nazar with the U.S. program has really shown that he can play with talent, because we know that is an absolutely stacked team. And I just think it makes a lot of sense for the Detroit Red Wings to go in this direction.
What would your thoughts be if the Ottawa Senators decided Frank Nazar was their guy at number 7?
Well, that's an option I didn't really consider, to be honest, Ross, because I really have the sense looking at a guy who can play the wing more likely than not. And I know that's kind of contradicting, as we just talked about Cutter Gauthier probably playing some center in college. But I really think they're going to go for someone that has a little bit more scoring touch, or at least that's where I would go here. And they love the size. We mentioned that's definitely a big difference between these two players is the size, and the Sens typically tend to lean on the bigger side of 6 feet.
Yeah, but damn, this kid's going to be a stud. I really think he's going to be a heck of a player. So naturally, being a Senators show, we hope they decide to pass on him. Take another Philip Zadina. Why don't you? But no, Nazar would be a great pick. And our friends over at Locked On Detroit Red Wings actually just did a prospect profile recently on Frank Nazar. So go over there, check it out. Brian Fisher, Scotty Bentley, absolute beauties. So go check them out at Locked On Red Wings. From that to the Locked On Sabres, another team with 2 first-round picks in the first half of this draft after the Vegas Golden Knights acquired their unhappy superstar and instead left behind, well, a pick of a team that didn't even make the Stanley Cup playoffs. So the Buffalo Sabres are now on the clock. Derek, how difficult of a pick or choice is this going to be for them?
Still difficult. I mean, there's still a lot of really quality players left. I mean, you've got Kamel, first and foremost, who's kind of slid at this point. Lekaramaki, who's a little bit more well-rounded, I think, than Kamel, but possesses some very similar qualities. So I could see them liking him as well. Now, the Sabres are absolutely stacked, if we're being honest, in the future. I mean, they have one of the best up-and-coming young teams in the NHL. So anyone that they add to their roster is just going to make them that much better down the road. Yeah, I think there's a couple of really good options left. And then you start playing with, the idea of maybe Brad Lambert, does that slide into the conversation at some point, even though he's a player who slid out of many people's conversations?
Yeah, I think really the Sabres are another team similar to Detroit that would love to take a centerman, but they're also at a point where they have had some struggles drafting, and they're not really, I don't think, in a position where they can just go for positional need. I think they need to just try to hit best player available, and we know they have good wingers in. They have Jack Quinn, and then there's guys that they have coming up in the pipeline that can help out on the wing, but I just think when Joakim Kemell is there and he slid all the way down, like we have him in a really high draft position. Yeah, 6 on our list. So the fact that he's available here for the Sabres, you cannot let that go by. So I think it would be a responsible decision for the Buffalo Sabres to draft Joakim Kemell in this spot.
Well, let's lock it in. The Buffalo Sabres are proud to select from Liga over in Finland, Joakim Kemell. Derek, what kind of player will the Buffalo Sabres expect to have with Kemell?
I think I mentioned earlier, he's kind of my draft baby. He's the first player that kind of grabbed my attention when I started doing this stuff because he has outstanding skill. His stick handling just kind of makes your jaw hit the floor when you're watching him play. The other part to his game that no one really talks about or knows about is his physicality. Now, he listed at or measured in at 5'9.5" at the combine, and I had him at 5'11". So huge variance there. It could actually factor into these selections a little bit. But the fact that he can hit so well makes it even more impressive. He's playing in a pro league, and he hits hard. Like he hits harder than a lot of guys. He doesn't shy away from the physical game at all. The other thing that he has, very similar to a player that we all know and love in Timmy Stützle, is that ability to draw penalties. He's just so elusive. He plays with so much deception in his game. He can pull away from checks so easily with a couple of little head fake here, little, break your ankles there. And next thing you know, he's behind you with the puck and you've got to trip him up. So he draws a ton of penalties. Obviously, his bread and butter, though, is his shot. I mean, he just has an absolute lethal release. His shot selection is brutal. It's the worst in the draft. I'll say that. Sometimes head scratching in the decisions that he makes on the ice. But if he can hone that
I saw
find that.
One game he had 10 shots and no goals. So sure, he's getting shots, but maybe try to get a little bit higher quality shots.
Oh, for real. And in the clips, sometimes you're just like, man, if you just had that playmaking ability, even a touch of playmaking, even a little touch of playmaking ability, you'd be so much better. And we'd be talking about him as definitely a top 3 pick if that were the case, because his skill is off the charts. And then the skating. I mean, the skating for a guy his size, it's not great. It's good. It could be above average at the next level, but it's not great. His edges are, he'll blow an edge here and there. But overall, you can't say no to a guy who can put up 35 to 40 goals, right? So, and that's his potential. And I really do see him reaching that potential in the NHL. His shot is just too good. You can't stop him.
Well, that takes care of our top 9 picks. We did it in a bit of a different order than our exact 9. But I think with that, they're all off the board. And as we pull it up, we'll take one more look. The Anaheim Ducks, by the way, are now on the clock, a team with great draft success over the last couple of years when you had players like Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale, Mason McTavish. Those are their last 3 first-round picks. They're certainly turning the corner of their rebuild, slow and steady in that sense. But where do they go? Well, we may as well take a look at our best available board. First, you can see here on our Google Doc, these are our top 9 prospects, all off the board in a different order. We had Nemec falling 1 spot from where we had him ranked. We had Kemell falling 3 spots, and Matthew Savoie jumping up to that number 5 spot. Nazar up to 8. No, right at 8. Perfect. If I knew English, it'd be nice and easy. We are at number 10, and right here are the best available. So Lekkerimaki, we already spoke about the shot, just an elite attribute there. Danila Yurov, and I'm curious just how far the Russian passports slide in this draft. Brad Lambert, the Finnish son of a Canadian kid. You don't hear too many Finnish kids named Brad Lambert, but certainly he's a player who has slid down draft boards. You've got 3 defensemen here, which makes this really interesting. Now, Mintyukov is a Russian passport, however, has been playing in the Ontario Hockey League for the for the Saginaw Spirit. And then we've got Kevin Korchinski out in Seattle and Denton Mateychuk in Moose Jaw. I want to kind of end this list here because I'm looking at the Anaheim Ducks. I'm seeing that they're a team that has a lot of offensive talent coming up, and they've already got some arrived. Now, on the back end, yeah, you added Drysdale. If I'm their new GM, Pat Verbeek, I'm looking at those 3 left shot defensemen, especially after losing Hampus Lindholm in the trade, which gave them, by the way, they're going to be on the clock, another team here with 2 first-round picks. So we've got Buffalo and Columbus and now Anaheim, all with multiple first-round picks this year. I think they have to go with one of those 3 defensemen. Now, Derek, how would you power rank the sorry, I'm trying to say both their names at once. I'm trying to say Mintyukov and Mateychuk together, and then Korchinski.
Yeah, I always say Minty because I don't know. Mintyukov just, it doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely. But
yeah, when we did Marishnishenkov today, and we just call him Miro. Miro made it nice and easy. So Minty, it sounds pretty good too. But yeah, how would you power rank these guys?
Yeah, man. When you're live recording and stuff, you've got to come up with short forms. The USN TDP, for just a little side note, they need to change that. Like, I'm petitioning for them to change it to something easy, like the development program. Anyhow,
sounds easy.
Yeah, that works.
Back to the topic though. Personally, I mean, Mateychuk was another one that I kind of fell in love with early. So he's a guy that if you're looking for sheer offensive production, that's going to be your guy. Like, that's the guy that is going to get it done. He's involved in every single play. Mintyukov is kind of a high risk, high reward type defenseman. They're not all that much different. These 3 guys, they all play with some risk in their game. But the most sort of refined guy on this list is actually Kevin Korchinski, who's probably the biggest riser in this entire draft. He just came out of nowhere. And his production's been great. He's obviously playing on a good team who's still actually playing. He's been great in the playoffs, but he's grown so much this year that you have to pay attention to it. You know, scouts always look at that. They look at the developmental trajectory of a player, and they see a guy like Korchinski who's just absolutely grown into a refined defenseman this year. How, you know, he used to just pinch all the time, and now he knows when to go and when to hold. And it's made such a difference in his game. His passings came to a whole new level. I mean, he's almost the perfect partner for Jamie Drysdale as a right shot D, Drysdale, left shot D, Korchinski. Man, that's one hell of a future D pairing.
And when we spoke to Scott Wheeler, he mentioned one of the biggest risers from last year's draft is this Olin Zellweger kid who they got in the first opening pick in the 2nd round. Now, that's another Northwest US WHL talent. And I think they go right back to the well. And they're going to take Kevin Korchinski in this mock draft. And for us, we've got him ranked pretty high at 14th overall. But the highest that any of our entities have him is Tony Ferrari at 11. So we're even jumping the gun a little bit further. But when he has the playoffs that this kid's having, it just takes notice. And that's why, I mean, certainly it's where you find yourself in the WHL. It's no one player can turn your fortunes that much. So he's fortunate to be on a good team that's allowing him the opportunity to raise his stock even more the deeper they go now in the making it all the way to the championship. And that Oil Kings team was just a complete wagon. Nobody was going to beat them. But 19 points in 25 games, including 6 goals. So able to create offense by himself from the back end there as well. And that's after 65 points in 67 games during the season. So certainly a worthy pick for the Anaheim Ducks. What does he do for them in their rebuild, Pilsy?
Well, I just think, like, you look at the Anaheim Ducks, and what they're doing is they're kind of working on passing the torch, right? Like Getzlaf, I think a big part of him sticking around this last season before retiring was looking at Trevor Zegras and letting him know how he's going to take this Anaheim Ducks organization. And then you look at Drysdale and possibly Korchinski, if that's the way that they go. And you've got Cam Fowler and Kevin Shattenkirk, 2 guys that can really help them learn how to play a defensive role for this Anaheim Ducks team in the years coming. And then you've got John Gibson back there as a goalie. So like they've got a lot of pieces figured out, and this would just give them a legitimate top pair in Drysdale and Korchinski that could be a top pair for years to come. So I really think this is a great direction for them to head. And personally, I've got Korchinski above of some of the other left shot defensemen available here.
Derek, do you think there's a good to very good chance that he's the third defenseman taken in the actual draft behind Nemec and Jiricek?
I do believe so. I think, the other two are more offensively prowess type, players, where Korchinski, as I said, just a little bit more refined, a little bit more calm, a little bit more growth potential in his game. You mentioned the 6 goals that he had in the playoffs. Well, he only had 4 goals in the entirety of the regular season. They said to him, you need to shoot the puck more. And guess what he did? He shot the puck more in the playoffs. And,
there you go.
It proved to work for him. So everything that's asked of him, he's done. And he's a player who just hasn't stopped growing throughout the season.
Yeah, I think he's the right pick here. Like he's just able to put up points in such a manner. 65 points in 67 games, and then 19 points in 25 playoff games here. The Ducks are looking like they're in a great spot rebuild-wise. I think they're trending in the right direction here, and that Pacific Division is a little bit weak right now. So I think they're noticing that, and they're saying, all right, let's get all our pieces together, and in a couple of years, we can take over this division and be powerhouses in California once again.
And I'm a huge fan of their up-and-coming goalie, too. He was a member of Eels at the same time as Lassie Thompson and Roby Jarventi as well. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. Ducks Elite. You guys
I'm on their cap friendly here.
Oh, help me
Callie
out.
Klang?
No. I think is he with Anaheim?
Lucas Dostal.
Lucas Dostal. Thank you very much. He's got 6 style, and he can stop the puck with the best of them. He's one of those guys, Pilsy, that we're about to talk with Scott Wheeler about, where it's that new wave of goalies where they don't have to be 6'5". Every guy. There's some smaller guys. It sucks. There's no tendies in the first round this year, but that's neither here nor there. We're actually agreeing with our pick as JD Hernandez, the host of Locked On Ducks, in our Locked On mock draft. He took Korchinski at 10, and Locked On Sabres also took Kamel at number 9. So we're doing it a bit our own way because Detroit, the boys over at Locked On Red Wings, took Brad Lambert. So they went with the big swing at number 8. Well, Derek, you mentioned that as a name where you can start having the conversation about him. I'll say that I believe Brad Lambert's going to go to a team that has multiple first-round picks because they're going to feel like they're able to take a bit of a swing. Could he go number 12 to the Columbus Blue Jackets? You got the Finnish connection, I know you said, Derek, although it's not maybe as natural of a one. I think that could certainly be an option, but I love what Anaheim's doing, and I think that this would be a very solid way to put that in their next step in the rebuild. So to recap, first overall, Shane Wright from the Kingston Frontenacs. Then we go to the U.S. National Team Development Program for Logan Cooley with the New Jersey Devils. The Arizona Coyotes taking Slovak Juraj Slavkovsky. Then David Jiricek, the first Czechia player off the board. Right defense. Then Morgan. I almost said Morgan Frost. Matthew Savoy. Some resemblance there from another Flyers first-round pick. From the Winnipeg Ice goes to Philadelphia. And then what we just accomplished with Derek Lee from Future Watch TV, Simon Nemec to Columbus, Cutter Gauthier to Ottawa, Frankie Nazar to the Detroit Red Wings, Joakim Kamel to the Buffalo Sabres, and Kevin Korchinski to the Anaheim Ducks. And now the San Jose Sharks are on the clock with pick number 11. So we had to bring in a heavy hitter for these next few picks, and we figured a natural spot would be to end with the Canucks because we are bringing in Vancouver's own Cam Robinson. You can follow him on Twitter at @hockey_Robinson. Great part of the Elite Prospects team. Their draft guide is out now. It is the number one resource when you're looking at all things NHL draft. How many hours, Cam, do you think you put into each one of these draft guides?
I mean, it's a full year-long pregnancy, really, right? Like we're giving birth to this thing. And I definitely cannot take even close to the lion's share credit. I know that like JD Burke, I think, put in about like 120 hours that final week just to get it out and finalize. Mitch Brown does a ton of work on all those, putting those player profiles together. And then as a team, we build those scouting reports throughout the year. It's literally thousands of hours of work that goes into that thing. And, you know, we're a fairly small team in the sense of things compared to like an NHL club. We don't have multi-million-dollar paid checks coming our way or flight plans and all that too. So we grind it out and we spend countless hours debating, discussing, you know, crying, laughing over all these players on the Slack as well. So it's truly a year-long process that we spend way too much time on, and we love it though. So it's we're happy when it comes out and it looks so great. You know, our graphic designer Hans too, he does incredible work. I'm always harassing him. I was just harassing him like right before I came on because I'm looking for a header for one of my articles. I know he's probably sleeping after never sleeping for the last week to put this together. So it's a full team effort for sure.
Yeah, and it's just incredible what you guys do every year. That's probably our top resources when we're doing our draft prospect profile. So we appreciate the work you put into it. Let it be known.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome, man. We can't thank you enough for all what you guys do. And I feel like this is kind of the fun part, right? It's released, and now you get the build up these last couple weeks before the draft. Are there any guys who you're going back in your own rankings right now and having that last minute, oh man, is he too low? Is he too high? Are there any of those guys you're still not set on where you have them?
Oh, of course. I'll release my personal board here probably the week leading up to the drafts. A few of us will sneak our personal boards out there and like I'll do it like literally moments before publication. Like I'll be in there fiddling around, you know, moving 65 to 63 and stuff. Like it's never ending. Like I'll lose sleep over it. Like honestly, I in years past I've literally like been lying in bed. It's like 1 a.m. and I'll be like, screw it, and just like open up my laptop and start fiddling around with it. Like it's just, you can never get it right. And as soon as it's published, then you're like, oh, I should have done this. I should have moved that guy. So it's, you can never be satisfied with it until, you know, 10 years down the road. One day, maybe I'll get it all right, but actually I won't. So it's all good.
Well, you were the one man brave enough a couple of years ago. You had Quinton Byfield as your number one guy on the board. You weren't tempted this year to move away from Shane Wright? He was your guy line to line?
He was, yeah, tip to tail. I kept him at the top. I was never really all that encouraged to move him off the top. Like, you know, there was the shine was always there for me, but you know, he didn't really put a stamp on it. So it did leave a window for discussion. But I know some public lists out there have moved him out of one. I know some teams have moved him out of one too. Just talking, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of some organizations that I have some contacts with. But you know, none of those teams are picking first that I know of that have moved him out of one. So it's a lot easier when you're picking 17 to be like, yeah, I'd take this guy at one when your job doesn't depend on it, right? So when I left Byfield at the top there the other year, it's like I kind of looked at myself and I was like, if I was the guy and the GM, or I was the GM and the owner said, you're making this pick and your job's on the line, it's like, you know, that's who I went with. But it is a lot easier when you're sitting on this side of the table and it's not on the line.
100%. Well, let's get into our draft that did have Shane Wright first. Now, before we get to picks 11 through 15, what are your overall impressions of our top 10? Does it look more or less how you would have it? We know probably not the way that the NHL draft is going to go, especially 2 and 3. There's been a lot of smoke, depending on whether New Jersey keeps the pick, that they would probably lean winger just based on having that center depth that they do with 2 first overall picks. But how do you think these first 10 picks are shaking out?
This is your opportunity to get mad at our list for once.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, for sure. I don't really see Cooley going to just because of what they have down the middle in New Jersey. So I think Slavkovsky's probably a slam dunk there. I think you flop those 2 guys and that's your top 3 pretty much locked in. You know, that 4 through, you know, 4, 5, 6, that's an interesting one because, you know, the Urasek versus Nemec debate has been raging all year. I know most teams prefer Nemec. I don't know who Seattle likes in that spot. I think Matt Savoy, he's a really interesting one. I actually have him quite a bit lower on my board. I think he's going to slip out of the top 10. I think he could be there, maybe even the middle round 1. So if he goes that early, that means a team like Philly, or if someone's jumping on him, they're really buying in that he can translate his game. And I have a lot of questions about that. I think Cutter Gauthier is going to go early, maybe even earlier than that. Like I could see him slipping into the top 5.
Wow.
He fancies himself a center. He played a decent amount of center this year with the program. He's a big boy. You know, I chatted with his former coach there with the program, Adam Nightingale, and he just said, like, we came in with a plan for him this year, and it's like 3 things you need to check off the box. Like, are your feet moving? Are you laying the body? And are you playing down low and getting into the middle of the ice? And he was hitting all those markers by the end of the year. some team I think is going to jump on him early and see themselves as being like, this is a top 6 center with size, with skill, with a great release. Not a ton of those in this class. So, having him in the top 10, I think is good for this list, but I could even see it going higher. Frankie Nazar, he's going to be a fun one. Like, we love him. I think he's a top 5 talent in this class, but I fully expect him to be there outside of the top 15. Like, all it takes is one team, obviously, to fall in love with him too. But he's a divisive kid in this class. And then, Kamel and Korchinski, I think, are probably going to be right around that range, even though I think Korchinski's he's a bit of a wild card. He's had not a great playoff run, and the defensive side of his game is not there, but man, he's dynamic offensively. And Kamel too, he's another one, not a very big guy, got the great shot, can tend to overhandle things. Like, I don't know, small wingers, teams don't love to line up for those guys. So we'll see. He's another one that I'm projecting might slip a little bit in this year's draft, but who the hell knows, right? Like, every year we go in there, we're like, this is how it's going to be. And then
you're talking to Senators podcast. You know who we took 10th overall last year. We've seen that. And when in our draft process, we had him as a 5-star guy for 39 or 42. Like, I love the way he plays the game, but now there's that extra layer of expectations and all that going on him. However, one thing that was said about Tyler Boucher before the draft, the kid's got a motor, unstoppable motor, always moving. And that's how we're kicking off this segment with pick number 11. I believe 4 out of 6 of you guys at Elite Prospects, yourself included, voted this guy as the highest motored player in the draft. Coming in at number 11 for the San Jose Sharks, Marco Kasper. Now, first question, Cam, does he project as a center? Because I know he played a lot of wing this past year, but a lot of entities, Elite Prospects included, have him at center.
Yeah, I think he's a pivot at the next level. Talk about motor, talk about physicality. I was having a little chat with a scout there the other day, and we were talking about physical players. And a lot of time you're looking, when it's discussed as physical players, it's hitting. Are they getting in the forecheck and laying the body? That's not always physical. Like, we're looking for competitiveness. This guy lifts sticks like crazy. Like, he just frustrates opponents. So he gets in. He's kind of mean too. Like, he gets in there and he lays the body, and he knows how to too. I'm working on a film room for him right now, and I think I've got like a 2-minute mixtape of him just burying guys in the SHL. But it's his tenacity that really makes him just so infuriating to play against. Doesn't have the greatest hands. He doesn't beat guys one-on-one very often. If he does, often he'll lose the puck as he's making that move. So might get around the guy, but doesn't maintain control. He's to me, I've compared him to like a Patrick Hornquist. I think he's going to, come into the league, and he's going to be the type of player that can play on your first power play unit as a net front, can just be a load to handle down low there, agitate, be physical, got good wheels. Another player that I think is going to go pretty early throughout the season. Playing in the SHL as a 17-year-old all year, that's already a feather in his cap. And we kind of, right at the beginning of the year, I was kind of like, this guy's like a locked-in first-rounder just for how he plays and where he's playing this year and succeeding. And as the season wore on, his playoffs, his world championships, he really elevated. He showed some more offensive skills. I think he's another one who's going top 10 this year too. So for San Jose, if they ended up grabbing him outside of the top 10, fits some holes in their organization. He's almost NHL ready. I could see him pushing for a job in 2023 sort of thing. He's going to be a player. He's going to be an interesting player. Whether or not he's top 6, that's kind of the big question. And when you're drafting a guy that early, you want to have top 6 upside. But I think for sure a safe kind of middle 6, bottom 6 for sure down the middle.
Yeah, we're big fans of Marco Kasper on this show, and when we profiled him, we liked him a lot. And I think it makes a lot of sense to San Jose too, because they've got a lot of that veteran presence there that I think will really respect the hustle that this kid puts into it. And I think they'll be kind of more willing to pass the torch down to someone with his kind of work ethic and kind of try to bring that franchise to where it used to be. I mean, they're still spending like they're contenders, but they're not in that spot anymore. So a guy like this would really help them out a lot. And if he falls to them, that's a big boost to their prospect pipeline, which doesn't really have a lot of heavy hitters like some of these other teams in this area.
Yeah, my question for you too, Cam, sorry, just quickly, is that you mentioned the physicality. Like, all these other guys that we're profiling are splitting time between the J20 league and the SHL. Is that the reason why he was able to just stick right away at a 17-year-old?
Yeah, plays a very mature game, very, very, gets pucks in deep, gets them out of the zone cleanly, and then gets in on the forecheck. He's I'm sure, ingratiated himself very quickly with that foot speed and that kind of tenacity that coaches just love, right? Like, you want to know that the guy you're throwing over the boards is going to be in there hard on the puck all the time and making guys' lives hard on him, even if he's 17. You know, you look at William Eklund, who had I would say a difficult draft plus one season this year. You know, those two guys would probably be arriving at similar times, maybe a year apart in San Jose. Is that you can mesh them up maybe as kind of like a young pair on a line and put another bet on the side, but like Casper can go create some space for a guy like Eklund and who can finish, and he can make those, you know, high difficulty creative plays too. So meshing up a couple of those guys could be pretty fun in San Jose as well.
And on the Elite Prospects draft guide, you guys have Zach Hyman as a shades of, and I appreciate the shades of rather than player comparable. Yes. It gives you a little more wiggle room. I know Pillsy got in trouble on this show once before. Hates when I bring it up. Said the production wise, we compared Stützle to Derek Stepan a little bit. And then, of course, the hockey gods had to trade Derek Stepan to Ottawa like next week. And it was a bit different time in his career. So now we like the shades of a little bit better. But definitely, certainly, if you like a Zach Hyman type, which I feel like the way you described him, like, all of a sudden my antenna's going up that Ottawa could be interested in him at 7, just with the way he plays, the style, the tenacity, and all that. Now, from a player who gets in on the forecheck every single time to a guy who's more lenient on his skills in terms of shot, we're going with the second pick for the Columbus Blue Jackets after taking Simon Nemec in this draft, which if they get him at 6, I think that's probably something they're sprinting up to the podium to do. We're going with Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Djurgården product. So did he play with Eklund then?
They bounced up and down. Yeah. So there was some times in the J20 together. There were times together up in the SHL together as well. Yeah.
So he's just a shooter, right? And the shades of, you guys have Mike Hoffman, who all of our listeners are pretty, familiar with his game. So is that just it? Kind of one strike offense when he enters the zone?
Kid's got a hell of a release, that's for sure. He's got, between him and Kamel, probably the best one-timers in the class, both for like smaller guys, which is pretty impressive too. Like, he knows how to get it off. He knows how to get his hands out in front of him. One of these guys that it's difficult to give a bad pass to. The question is, he's 5'9.5", 5'10", whatever he is. He's very reliant on his hands, which isn't always a great, thing that's going to translate all that well to the NHL when defense is a lot better than they are in the J20 or even in the SHL. And he also can have struggled to get into the inside at times too. So another thing you don't love to see for a smaller winger, but the kid had, some great international performances. He had a lot more opportunity playing in the SHL this year than a kid like Liam Ogren or Noah Ostlund. They preferred to get Lekkerimäki up there and give him some offensive minutes and let him shine because, he is an offensive player. He does have good hands. He has pretty good vision. He can kind of frustrate me a little bit with missing some of the best play potentials. David St. Louis, if he was here with me right now, I know he's coming on later on, but he's not big on him at all. And so NHL teams, when we released our last board and we had him down there, I probably got like 3 or 4 texts within the first 20 minutes, just being like, "You guys are off on Lekkerimäki. You're not seeing what we're seeing." And so, all right, we don't make our board based on what the NHL teams do because they're not flawless either. But it makes me go back and watch. And so, I bumped him up a little bit on my board, which will come out here pretty soon. He's still not in the top 10 for me either. But I think he has that top 6 upside that you're looking to grab at this point of the draft, right? So if he breaks right, like, there could be first line potential if he can put it all together, or I think more of kind of a goal scoring second liner, which is still, there's value there. This is the guy who has 30 goal upside for sure. It's that is the rest of his game or the rest of the pieces going to come together and translate well enough to afford him, number one, the opportunity, because you're going to need to get those minutes, and the power play opportunity most importantly too. So we'll see. He's a bit of another wild card here with his stature, but his tools they're up there for sure.
Yeah. Now, when you made the choice to use Columbus's second pick to select Lekkerimäki, was that more because you really saw a fit with him in the organization, or it's just simply a point of, hey, he's the best player available? They got a massive rebuild on their hands. You can't pass up on a scorer like this.
I think it helps that it was their second pick, right? Is teams that have multiple first-round picks have more leeway to take swings on guys, right? So you get yourself a Simon Nemec with your first pick, and you're like, okay, we're already set now for our first round. Let's go and take some cuts here, right? They got Kent Johnson, they got Cole Sillinger, both likely to play the middle, both highly skilled guys that can get the puck to players, especially Kent Johnson. Like, that kid is so smooth out there, and he can draw all that coverage and then maybe dish it over to a kid like Lekkerimaki to finish it off. So I think it fits, that kind of big swing, go for it, rebuilding model that Columbus is in right now. So that helped it. And also, I wouldn't actually say he's the best player, because he won't be the best player sitting there on my board at the end of the day, but just kind of trying to get inside the GM's heads a little bit here for this.
I love that. So right now you're laughing if you're Jarmo Kekalainen, already having Nemec and now Lekkerimaki in the organization. Now moving on to the New York Islanders, who didn't pick until 52nd last year, but got a player who at one point was seen as the #1 prospect in Aatu Räty. Now that dropped well before the draft, but it still tumbled on draft day all the way down. Like, I don't think they're getting a player that you could say has fallen out of what our top 12 is, maybe from your list, but I don't think there's anything too egregious right now. But you're going to a defenseman who missed all of the previous year and banking on some serious production at 13th overall here with Pavel Mintyukov. Did I butcher that? Probably. But man, this guy is like, watching, we did his profile yesterday, and his skating is just unbelievable in my opinion.
Man, kid's a player for sure. There's a few backs in this class that I think there's a possibility that he could end up the best one, the most impactful defender from this group, similar to, Sergachev, who went outside of the top 10, I believe, in his year. And this kid is good. And like you said, he missed his whole draft -1 season due to the pandemic. Like, how shitty would that be to come over to North America? You've been in Moscow your whole life, and you're like, all right, I'm moving to the OHL. Let's go do this. And you arrive and you're like, okay, we're waiting. No season for me. Yeah. That'd be pretty brutal, just with, the culture shock and everything. But so then to step in the way he did and put up nearly a point a game, so good at activating. His offensive instincts are terrific. He played a little more structured game than a guy like Denton Mateychuk, who also is just like high end offensive ability. He's, some people kind of knock his defensive ability. I think he's actually got some like decent nuance to it. Like on the back pedal, he's got a good stick. He can close the gap out pretty well. He's got good size, 6'2", 6'2.5". He's already physically mature. He's an older player. Being an 03 kid, he's not bad. I think that there is some in zone stuff that needs to be cleaned up. But you know what? Most of these 17, 18-year-old defensemen need that, right? It's just such a difficult position to master at that age. I think the sky's the limit for Mintyukov. I have him in my top 10. I know that there's a ton of teams that are hoping he's available in that kind of 12 to 15 range that would be really, really interested in grabbing him because he has top 4 upside. We'll see if he has top 2. That'll kind of be up to player development and how he takes strides. But right now he's looking like a really nice, safe kind of 3-4 defenseman down the line. And I think that there is room to grow for that. So, for the Isles, they're a defensive minded team traditionally. They could use some more offense, but at this point for me, I just looked at it as being like it fits their organization and kind of their philosophy. And he's probably the best player available sitting there.
And from what I've noticed with kind of the left shot D that are in this part of the draft after the 2 right-handers get selected, Mintyukov, like you guys, all your game reports and scouting reports on him, at the start of the year, you were really hard on his defensive effort and his defensive ability. But I noticed as the year went on, almost all your scout reports say he's really improved defensively, but he's still putting up points, he's still scoring goals. Whereas some of the other guys, it's like, okay, sure, they're still putting up points, but they haven't learned anything defensively. If anything, they might have gotten worse as the year has gone on. So is that going to be a big reason why scouts would lean towards him as their left-hand shot defenseman as opposed to a couple other guys in this kind of range?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a part in it. Is that, it's really, it cannot be understated how difficult it is for basically this whole crop of OHLers who didn't get to play last year. Like, that is just such a massive year to lose in development wise. So the fact that he came in this year and was struggling a bit defensively wasn't a surprise to me in the least. But the fact that he did find that elevation, you want to see your prospects on the right trajectory throughout their draft eligible season. There's a kid like, Filip Mešár who played in the top Slovak league, who I did a big deep dive, watched tons and tons of his game early on in the season, see this electric skill set, be like, okay, now he's got to get in the middle of the ice more. He's got to get a little more physical. You watch him last game of the season, he's doing the exact same thing. It's stagnating. You don't want to see that from a player. Mintyukov, I think, did take steps. His offensive game, maybe polished a little bit more as the year went on, his creativity, but that defensive, the angling, the footwork, not running around and getting lost in his own zone. Those steps, I think, are really key. And also the physical maturity, the birth date. You're getting more of a sure thing, I would say, than maybe a different guy like Kevin Korchinski or Denton Mateychuk, where they're younger and they have more gaps in their defensive game, and you have to refine them more. You have to get them into your player development system and really work with them and hone that in. Is that there's still that big upside, but there's risk attached to it, right? So I think that teams are definitely kind of keying in on him as probably that. I think that number 3 defenseman on the board this year, even though Korchinski and your guys' mock hero has gone before him.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. If you were making the pick for Anaheim, would Mintyukov be your pick over Korchinski?
Man, I got Korchinski like around 20. So,
okay.
So yeah.
It's that bad in the D zone, eh?
I think it is. I mean, not to say that he can't clean it up, but like
right.
Highly reliant on the power play, right? Like even his even strength abilities, like he can make some moves, but man, oh man, does he have some just complete brain farts when he's carrying the puck out of his own end or making some just wild dishes that miss the mark completely. But he's got all the physical tools there. I put a lot of stock into awareness, decision making, how you read the play, especially for defenders too. Is that's a position that you need to be intelligent on if you want to succeed. And so, for me, Korchinski is someone that I've gone up and down on. For a minute there, I thought he was a top 10 player. Now I think he's more, take a gamble on him later in the teens.
Absolutely love it. Well, we've got him going to the Islanders here when we're talking about Mintyukov going at 13th. And now we move to 14, the city in which I reside, the Winnipeg Jets, who are kind of rebuilding on the fly, it seems. We'll see what happens if they do end up with their man in Barry Trotz, but they've had a couple of good drafts in a row. You get Cole Perfetti in 2020, and then last year, Chaz Lucius, who we're pretty high on, he fell down to, I think, 19. It was in the late teens they got him, and we've got them sticking local for their pick here, going 14th from the Winnipeg Ice, Connor Geekie. Now, Cam, to me, it's a pretty polarizing pick. We've seen him as high as top 10 in a couple lists, but then we've seen him drop out of the top 15 in others. What do you believe gives the Winnipeg Jets confidence that he can figure out that skating?
Well, I just was having a little fun with this pick, to be honest with you. They'll go sign Barry Trotz, a Winnipeg boy, right? And then they'll go and draft Connor Geekie, right? And they'll just tell that to the fans that we're keeping it local. We don't have an airport, but we got local guys on the team, right?
What about Mateychuk? Your boy's a Manitoba kid.
I love him, and I definitely have him higher than Connor Geekie, but I gave a little nod. I also think that Mark Scheifele's time maybe isn't so long there. They're going to be looking at, hey, we got Cole Perfetti, but we need more. We need more down the middle of the ice. We need to lock that in, have a couple more darts. The thing with Connor Geekie too, really strong defensively, like really smart defensively. If the skating doesn't get to the level that you need it to be, I still think he's going to be a third liner. I still think he's going to be he's got the big body. He can play a heavy presence. He can learn to play a different style of game. And he could be like a pretty serious third line checking center, energy line guy. But he also has the smooth hands for a big man, 6'4". He's already over 200 pounds. He's probably going to play at 215, 220. Great hands, like really, really nice hands, great awareness. He's smart. He can pass the puck well, decent shot, but it is that foot speed and that pace. The pace is maybe more of a concern than the foot speed, is that he kind of plays this lumbering, hunting, searching game out there, which works for some players because they have the ability to crank it up. They have that 3-step quickness that, okay, I'm searching, bang, now I'm gone. He doesn't have that ability. So, he's searching, and then it's like, okay, and you got to get the motor going. But, he knows that it's a weak point for him. He's obviously going to put in a lot of time working on his skating, working on his foot speed, up in that pace, put up a ton of points on a really strong ice team this year. But, I mean, who didn't playing on that squad? Everything ran through Savoy, and then if it didn't, it was running through Geekie. But I think big, skillful centers don't tend to stick around on the board too long on draft day. So for me, another player that's going to be sitting outside of my top 15 or right around there, but I think we'll probably go earlier. It's just one of those things. And for Winnipeg, I think it makes sense for them to target, a big center down the middle, and, the hometown thing it doesn't hurt either.
If you combined Geekie and Savoy's best attributes, we talking about a first overall pick in this draft?
Sure. Yeah, you could probably do that. That'd be fun.
geeky size with Savoy's kind of hands and for not even hands, but feet more so.
The feet. Yeah.
You'd have a hell of a player there, hey?
Yeah, you
James
would.
Patrick has some work to do this offseason to put those two together. That to say, perfect to end off. You know, you're a BC guy, so we figured have you on and finish you off with the Vancouver Canucks, who I know you're picking one of your favorites here. I've already seen it from the write-ups. I've seen it from your YouTube channel. Is awesome, by the way, because there's such quick clips that you use for your articles. So everyone go check out Cam Robinson on YouTube just for quick hitting highlights. I saw some of your Slafkovsky clips, like a minute long, of like 25,000 views. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, hey?
I was blown away by that. It's funny. I think like almost all of the top 20 views on my YouTube channel, which I don't do for like to get views or subscribers or anything. I just have to do it so that I can upload them into my articles. I have to put them into YouTube. But yeah, I got like 75,000 hits on these podcasts. I'm like, obviously Montreal fans have found this YouTube channel.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Well,
if you like Cam Robinson's YouTube, then come subscribe to Locked On Senators. That's how we do, because we're in the business of that, no doubt. But hey, that to say, we've got one of your favorites here. Why don't you tee it up? To the Vancouver Canucks?
We're taking Liam Ogren, hey, out of the Djurgårdens program again. So we're kicking back there again. We've been talking about him a lot. This kid legitimately is one of my favorite prospects in this class, maybe my favorite player. I just watched way too many hours of his film there the last few weeks, gearing up to drop a film room that just came out yesterday. He's awesome. He's really, really good. He's so mature, both physically and mentally. He scored over a goal a game in the J20 this season. And usually you'd be like, oh, okay, he scored over a goal a game. Like, obviously they just have a dominant power play, especially, a team has Lekkerimäki, Ogren, Ostlund, and Kalle Odelius on their team, like 4 guys that are probably going to go in the first round. But he scored 85% of his goals at even strength. Like, that is nuts to me, right? And then he jumps up and plays 25 games in the SHL, clearly like in a third, fourth line role. And the coach is like, go out there and don't make any mistakes. And he's like, okay. So he just plays this complete north-south game, getting in on the forecheck, hard on pucks, lifting sticks, keeping it in zone. Again, like refuses to dump the puck in or out of zones. Like, he carries the puck, keeps control either with the stick handle or with the pass in all 3 zones. Like, he just loves the puck possession game. I think another one where I think he dumped the puck into the zone like 3% of the time, and like all of his puck touches throughout both leagues. Super, super mature, great release, like just a rocket of a shot. Another kid that you can't give a bad pass to. He gets his hands out, gets his front foot angled towards the net, builds that power from that strong lower half. I'm a big, big fan of this kid. I think that if he was playing in the middle of the ice, this would be another one where everyone would be like, yeah, top 10 for sure. He's a top 10 talent that's going to go outside of the top 10. Another one that I think that some teams are hoping he's going to be there later in the teens. Teams might even look to like slide back a little bit and pick up a second rounder in hopes of grabbing him and maybe like his buddy Adelius as well, who might fall a bit just from public lists anyways. But yeah, he's one of these ones that I think it's going to be, he'll play next year in the Allsvenskan because Djurgården got demoted, which will be good. I think that'll be fine for him. That just, it'll kind of give him more of an opportunity to play probably higher up the lineup because they're going to lose some of their veterans that won't want to stick around and play in the Allsvenskan. So he'll have a higher role in that league, and then bang, like he could be pushing for a legit job in the bottom 6 in 2023 for whoever grabs him. And if that's Vancouver, they'll probably have the room to slide him into that lineup as they need that kind of young offensive talent. It's a club that needs defensive help, a lot of it in their pipeline. So, it was tempting to put in a Denton Matejchuk, but, I know that they're not that sweet on him, is from what I've heard. And so I kind of kept that in my back pocket in considering this. And so Liam Ogren, they love their Swedes in Vancouver. They got a Swedish GM. He kind of fits the model of what they need. They need a little bit of everything, and he brings a little bit of everything. So yeah, big fan of this kid. I think he's going to go later than he should. And then, years down the road, we're going to be like, this guy's great. Why didn't he go in the top 10?
Or does he have the Rachel Dory seal of approval, though?
I'm sure Rachel loves this kid, right? How could she not?
Yeah, and I mean, we know you love him. You gave him best shot of the entire draft. Now, my kind of question is, from my understanding, Ogren, Ostlund, and Lekkerimäki played a lot of the season as a line and played together. How much of an impact do you think it's going to be? I mean, I say if, but probably when they're not drafted all together as a trio and are going to have to play separate from each other. Do you think that's going to kind of hinder them, or their games are so strong that it doesn't really matter?
You know who it's not going to hinder? Liam Ogren. is that,
Okay.
you know, maybe the other guys, Noah Ostlund, who I love his skill, I love his vision, a little undersized and not the best skater, is that he's going to have a harder time probably translating that. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll be able to. Lekkerimäki, the same thing, right? Just a finisher, but a bit smaller, needs to kind of get someone else who gives him the puck. You know, I talked to a ton of scouts when I was writing that film room on Ogren, and, you know, almost to a man or woman, they said, you know, doesn't have to be the driver of play on his line, but doesn't mean he can't drive play himself. So he's kind of this versatile chameleon that whatever you want him to do, he'll go do. He'd be like, you want to be like the puck handler and deke everybody out and set it up, go ahead and do it. Now we were talking about Casper earlier, doesn't have great hands. Ogren can embarrass guys with his hands. You know, you want him to be the finisher, go be in the bumper on that top power play in it, boom, he'll pop out and he'll finish. He can be the net front guy. He can be the guy, like I said, in the SHL, where it's his job is just to go up and down the wing and hammer guys and get pucks in deep and be smart about it. He can do that too. So he can just play whatever role you want him to play, versus those other guys, I think, are kind of more specific to what their skill set is, and that the teams who draft him will have to kind of fit that puzzle piece into what they have, where Ogren is just going to be like, where do you need me, coach? I'll go make it happen.
So on your elite prospects team list, he's 13th. Is it safe to say he's even higher on yours?
Yeah, he's in my top 10 for sure. He's I'll give you a little preview here. I think I got him at 7 right now. Taking a little peeky here. Yeah, I got him at 7. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Well,
where
as
the
you
Ottawa
have...
Senators select.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
They've selected a sweet or two in their day. One of them's jerseys behind. We're trying to get a push here for the Hall
Decent
of Fame.
player, right? It's a criminal that he's not in there.
Thank you.
Criminal.
Thank you. Should we just get an all Swedish induction class this year? Get the two Sedins, Zetterberg, and Alfredson, and call it a day.
Yeah.
You know what? You toss McGillney in there too, because he deserves to be in the show.
You know what the problem is? Because then we have to mention Jaromir Jagr, first year eligible. Like there's
he might deserve that spot too.
Yeah, Roberto Luongo. I guess it is kind of the Hall of Fame. It shouldn't be easy to get in, but I appreciate that little pump. We'll pump you up one more time. We obviously appreciate you doing this. Yeah. Cam Robinson on Twitter, hockey_Robinson. Just give him a hard time when he brings up the Zibanejad trade. But other than that, he's actually a good guy. Before we let you go, though, here's our top 15 right now. As we send it over to Scott Wheeler for the next 5 picks, who is your best player still available on the board right now?
It's going to be Denton Mateychuk. He's going to be the best guy sitting on my board still. And then we're pushing down, Owen Pickering, Danilo Yurov. A guy I was really tempted to slide in here into this zone was Liam Bixel as well, who I think is going to go a lot earlier too. So there's going to be some interesting ones for Wheeler there.
There will certainly be some great options for Scott Wheeler from The Athletic, who joins us now. Scott, first question as we see the draft board up. You're going to help us out here with Buffalo's picks all the way through 20. So there's some really interesting names left. But how do you think this top 15 has played out? Could you see it more or less going in this order?
I think the only thing that jumps out at me immediately at first glance here is that the Columbus Blue Jackets have made hay here. I don't know who picked for them with their first and second pick, but I think Simon Nemec, for me, is the very best D prospect in this draft class and deserves to be a top 5 pick. And then Jonathan Lekkerimäki, same kind of thing, but in the top 10 conversation. So to get them both at 6 and 12, I think you're getting really good value there. Not unlike the value that they got a year ago with Kent Johnson and Cole Sillinger and later Corson Kuhlmans with their third first a year ago. So I really like that for them. That would be a haul. That would be a huge injection of skill. Lekkerimäki is kind of the natural scorer, and I think he would work really well with a playmaker like Kent Johnson potentially. And then Nemec, I mean, that's your potential sort of number 1, number 2 D of the future. Not quite sold on number 1 upside, but he's going to be a top of the lineup defender. So really, really like that for them. And no other major surprises other than that. Those 15 names are just about the 15 names that you'd expect to go at the front half of the first round.
Well, you must like having your boy Matthew Savoy go in our top 5. Hey, you're higher than him on a lot of people, so that must be a nice little feather in your cap here. Russ Cohen picked that one, and he hosts Locked On Flyers, so he thinks that the Flyers would do well with getting Matthew Savoy in the mix. I'm sure you were initially hoping that you could be the guy to make that pick for them here in this next, but we just got yours this morning, and I like where you're going in different directions here. So let's get right into it. Who are the Buffalo Sabres selecting on 16th on your board?
I like Brad Lambert for Buffalo at 16. I think there's a chance that Brad slips a little bit further than 16 where I have him going here. But I just love that injection of skill. I think the Sabres are prepared to really swing big here. They've got obviously a number of high picks in this draft for the second year in a row. And I think it makes a lot of sense for the Sabres. Obviously, then you're taking two likely future wingers. They've already selected Joakim Kemmel earlier on in this process. So Lambert would be another winger. I'm sure that's not their best case scenario. That's probably not their ideal outcome here. I expect that they would have really liked a center here, whether that's Frank Nazar or Marco Kasper. If one of those guys is available at 16, I think the Sabres will be keen to grab one, especially if they take a winger at the very top. But I like the value swing on Lambert. He's got a ton of talent. I'm really looking forward to speaking with him in a couple of days here for a Q&A we're doing. And awesome. Everybody I still talk to, there is still belief. There are certain teams that have him in the second round and that have drifted on him and were disappointed by his year this year. But by and large, you won't talk to a scout who doesn't see the skill and the skating and the sort of offensive package that he possesses. So I expect him to have a big bounce back year next year. And I think there's a real opportunity here with Lambert and with countryman Joakim Kemmel, who's already been selected for the Sabres in this mock. I think that would be a real opportunity to inject some skill. And those guys are obviously familiar with each other. They actually played together on the same team to start this year before Brad Lambert switched to the Pelicans. So I like Lambert here for the sort of skill skating package. And Buffalo's got such a strong pool at this stage. They've done a really good job the last couple of years. They've got such a strong pool. They can take a swing on a player like Brad.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when you're a team like the Sabres that has 3 first-round selections, if you decide with the middle of those first-round picks to really take a swing, I think that makes a lot of sense. You're getting 2 dynamic Finnish wingers here. And you start looking at the Sabres prospect pipeline, and you could have wingers Jack Quinn, Joakim Kemmel, and then Brad Lambert. Like, that is a lot of skill on the wings for the Sabres. I think they probably need some help down the middle as well. So maybe with that 3rd pick in this mock draft, we'll see them take a center here. But yeah, as far as the fit goes, I think it makes a lot of sense. And but like, they would be able to be patient with Lambert, which I think is something too that needs to be said, because I think when you're looking at the skill that he has, maybe some teams are thinking, okay, we can get him earlier and into the pros. But I think if you're the Sabres, you can take a little more time, work on his skills and tools that need work, and this could be a great play for them in the future.
Now, the one thing about Brad Lambert's game and career so far overseas is that he's bounced around, went from his childhood club to JYP, but then back to the Pelicans. Keep the hat on of Kevin Adams with the Buffalo Sabres. Scott, where is Brad Lambert playing next year? His rights in the WHL are with Saskatoon. He's got family ties there. His uncle and dad both played for that team. He would be AHL eligible, or you can keep him in Liga. What's the play with Brad Lambert for next year?
Yeah, it's tricky. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to speaking with him about when I do my Q&As. Just try to get a feel and a sense and a real commitment from him as to where he might be playing next year. He does have options. I don't think returning to Liga is probably in his best interest. I think there's a chance he goes back, but with the way that this year played out, with the way he bounced between those two teams, he would need to earn a role prominent in the lineup and need to play big minutes to really bounce back. I think it proved this year, if he's playing 15 or less minutes in a game and not getting touches and not being featured prominently on the top power play unit, like, he's just not a kid who thrives playing 11, 12 minutes. That's just not his game. He needs to be out there and involved offensively and all of that. So I would be tempted, if I was in his shoes, to go and play in the WHL and get back on this side and play on North American ice. I actually think his game is better suited for North American ice than the hybrid ice that they predominantly play on in Finland. But it's complicated. It's not an easy call. And the more moves you make, the more that people start to ask questions. And whichever NHL team drafts him, I expect will have a pretty strong say in where he plays next year. I think whichever team takes him is going to be pretty opinionated about that. It's going to be something that they've thought a lot about, and they will likely steer him in the direction that they want him to go. And I honestly think getting him over here and playing junior may be the best bet. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was a 90, 100-point player in the WHL. He's got that kind of skill. So Maybe that's just the way to get him feeling good about himself, get the confidence back on track. He gets to play a big role at 2 World Juniors, both in August and in December. He'll still get to play for Finland and be a big part of their offense. So I think that, if anything, would be my preference. But I wouldn't rule out him returning to Liga either. It's going to be a complicated decision for him.
Well, we look forward to seeing that article coming up in The Athletic with Scott Wheeler. The Buffalo Sabres have made 2 picks, both Finns so far. And let's take a look at our best available board here. And we've got Scott's final rankings in there as well. He just took our 12th ranked player in Brad Lambert, who's even higher on Scott's list, up at 8. So there's still lots of talent here. We've got 2 Russians at the top of our best available, which again, we did figure there could be some slipping, knowing with what's going on in the world. But with the 17th overall pick, Scott, you're not taking either Danila Yurov or Ivan Miroshnichenko. You're going back to the WHL. Maybe a guy who plays against Brad Lambert next year. The Nashville Predators are going to select defenseman Denton Mateychuk. What would they be looking forward in getting with him?
I really like Mateychuk for the Preds. I fully expect the Preds are going to take a defenseman with that first-round pick, and I considered a few names here. I thought about Ryan Bichsel. I thought about Ryan Chesley. I thought about Owen Pickering. There are a few names in this range in the teens that I suspect that they will be fond of, and it just makes too much sense for them to take a defender. They've used a lot of their recent high picks. They've developed actually a pretty strong, admirable pool at forward with Fyodor Svechkov, Zachary Leroux, Luke Evangelista, who was a star in the OHL this year. Philip Tomasino is obviously now a young roster player for them. Igor Afanasiev. So they've got 6 or 7 really quality pieces in their pool at forward. And it's just been a while since they've really sort of shored up that blue line there. And that's almost antithetical for a team like the Preds, right? Who we're just so used to seeing with the defenders. And Mateychuk, I just think he may not be the stylistic player that they want there. They may be partial to a kid like a Ryan Bichsel or an Owen Pickering, the sort of 6'4", 6'5" type. But in saying that, I think everybody recognizes that Mateychuk, despite being 5'11", is one of the best 3-zone players in this draft. He has a ton of respect in the WHL for his game on both sides of the puck. Everybody talks about the offense, and the offense is definitely the bread and butter. But they'll tell you in Moose Jaw, he is their best 3-zone player. He's their best defender. And I think that speaks volumes when they talk about him that way. So Mateychuk just feels like a kid where if he's the last of the big name D available, he's not going to linger into the 20s. And I suspect that this range at 17 for Nashville just makes a lot of sense for him. So that combined with how strong their pool is at forward, I really like Mateychuk for them.
So interesting. We have an interview coming up with David St. Louis from Elite Prospects, and he says he plays a little bit like Roman Josi in terms of he's just all over the ice all the time. So get him
he's
in
very active.
Yeah,
he's a very active, involved player on and off the puck. So,
Pilsy?
Yeah, and I think if you're the Nashville Predators, like, why not dip back into drafting defensemen? Because they just stockpile them in recent history, and obviously the same GM for Nashville in David Poile, and he's been there a long time. He knows what he's doing. And what they do is they just stack up all these valuable defensemen, and then they say, okay, let's use these guys as assets to get other players we need. They needed centerman. Seth Jones was developed, and they traded him for Ryan Johansson. They just shipped out Ryan Ellis. Like, there's so many different ways that they can get value by drafting defensemen and then deciding, hey, is he going to work here, or do we just develop him up, raise his value, and then use him as a trade piece? So I think Mateychuk would fit that bill if necessary.
So the defensive pipeline continues with the Nashville Predators, a team that's drafted and developed so many throughout their franchise's history, and they take Denton Mateychuk from the Moose Jaw Warriors. All right, at some point, a Russian has to go off the board. There's 2 that are looking, just inching closer, staying as our best available. Scott, is this the pick with the Dallas Stars coming in at 18th overall?
This is still not the pick.
No.
The Dallas Stars feel a little bit like the Nashville Predators to me, where it just feels like they're another team that's going to take a defenseman. And I say that because Logan Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston were arguably the 2 best players in junior hockey last year, and they drafted both of them in last year's draft. The year before that, they drafted Maverick Bork, who was, I don't know, a top 10 player in junior hockey this year. So they've, again, just in the same way that Nashville has stockpiled forwards, I think they've done a really admirable job in Dallas to just bring in forwards, whether centers, wingers, what have you. So it just feels they're due. They obviously selected Thomas Harley a few years ago, but Thomas has struggled to make the leap from top prospect to top player. And it does feel like behind Thomas, and Thomas plays a little bit of a sort of haywire, loose game at times. It does feel like behind Harley, they could really stand to add a defender. So I've actually got the Dallas Stars taking Lion Bichsel, the Swiss 6'5" defender out of Sweden. And he's been developed in Sweden and has done a really good job over there, sort of working his way up the ranks, playing at the SHL level this year, and not looking out of place, frankly. I thought he was really impressive in the SHL this season. So that, plus the fact that he was interviewed by 32 teams at the Combine, and everybody seems really interested in that size skating package. He actually moves fairly well, despite being one of the heaviest players in the draft class. I think that makes him really appealing to a lot of teams. And as a result, I don't think he's going to sit long, sort of past the teens or early 20s. I think you'll see him get picked in that range. So just makes a lot of sense for Dallas here as a sort of close to NHL ready player who, despite suffering a concussion on a brutal check from behind in March and missing much of the second half of the season, still has scouts really, really excited about him. And he's just so big and strong and still capable. He's not just the sort of stay-at-home type. He feels comfortable with the puck on his stick. He prides himself on handling the puck and making plays. And I think teams are just going to fall in love with that package and who he is as a kid and athlete and how strong he is. So I really like him. I think the Preds and the Stars are going to take D back-to-back here, and I really like him for Dallas.
So you're getting into the brain here, though, of Jim Nill, because for you, I mean, he's in the second round in your rankings. And even for us, it's a bit of a reach in terms of the average. We have him at 28. This is definitely the largest gap between where our average is versus where they are selecting. So does Jim Nill see this as like, while we're still in this competitive window, we can bring him along and have him step right into the top six? Is he one of the more NHL-ready defensemen, I should ask, in terms of players in this draft?
Definitely. He's just a year further along than most kids. He's already playing at the pro level. He's a contributor at the pro level. They feel comfortable with him there. He's not one of those players who stepped into Leksand and was playing sort of 7-8 minutes a night. They really trusted him. They felt like he could be a regular top six guy who could take a shift at even strength when it was his turn. So that's just not where many of these prospects are at in Europe. None of the kids really on D over in Finland, Russia, or Czech Republic, go down the list. Other than the two big D at the very top, David Jiricek and Simon Nemec, none of the other kids who are going to be selected in this range are at that point in their young careers. So that's a testament to who he is, the roundedness he has. And I think it's worth adding that he is a player who's more well respected by NHL scouts than the public lists recognize. Right. A lot like another kid that I'm going to pick 2 picks from now. He's a kid that just he's earned a lot of respect, and I think he's going to go much higher than where I have him. And it's not one of those things where I'm super firm on him being a second rounder either. I do see the appeal. I just think at his size and how heavy he is, there is some risk that comes with that. He moves fine out there, and that is something that teams are fond of in his game. But I do think if he ends up at 240 pounds, which is very possible for him, there aren't a lot of players playing at that weight who aren't sort of slow or struggle with their feet in the NHL. It becomes hard to move out there when you're that heavy. So that's part of it. And then his game offensively, it's there. He can handle the puck and make plays, but he's never going to be a sort of power play guy or anything like that either. So that complicates the projection for me a little bit.
Yeah, and I think going the route of defenseman for Dallas Stars makes a lot of sense, especially a big guy. They were very familiar with having a young, big defenseman in Jamie Oleksiak, right? That's someone that they really coveted, and they ended up losing him to Seattle recently here as he got a major pay raise from them. That might be a big reason why. And then they're going to lose out on John Klingberg, as it seems too. So they're going to be looking to kind of re-inject some youth into their decor here. So I think this would be a great way to go.
Yeah, I just think Lyon just makes a ton of sense for them. And he and Denton do feel like they belong at the very front end of that sort of group of defenders. So, again, both of those guys, I think, will be gone in the teens. And that's where we're at now. We're starting to drift into the 20s here. And they make a lot of sense for range and also for just positional need for both Nashville and Dallas.
So we know that Big Sal, I played a lot more at the SHL level than the J20, but Pillsy went on just a rant the other day. So before we move off him, I mean, he had 7 points in 11 games, but for a lot of these Swedish kids and Russians, especially the Russians, like we'll get to someone's ice time here coming up in a sec, but like, what is the development system like? Like, do you think it helps or hurts them that they're moving up between all these levels, playing so many different teammates? And it just seems like such a different way than what we're used to in major junior and college.
Yeah, it's definitely a grind, more in Russia than anywhere else in the hockey world. Those kids often go up and sit on the bench, and it frankly makes no sense to me. If they're trying to develop NHL talent, it's not the play. It's just not the right avenue for a lot of those kids, and they would be much better served playing in the second tier VHL at the top of the lineup, or certainly in the MHL. Even if they feel like they're getting too little out of playing in the MHL and they're too dominant there, I still think those kids are better off. Yeah, they're getting reps. They're feeling good about themselves. They're playing. There is no reason that those kids should be going up and playing 1 or 2 shifts, or in many cases, spending 60 minutes. Exactly. Spending 60 minutes stapled to the bench. So, it's a challenge in Russia for sure. But the other thing is I talk about it as if you're trying to develop NHL players. And frankly, they don't care about developing NHL players. They've made that clear over the years. Those teams are looking to win the KHL title. That's all they carry. That's all they're worried about. And the NHL futures of these kids is not their priorities. And frankly, they'd like for more of them to stay over there and sign contracts and stick around and all of that. So it's a complicated process, especially with those kids who play in the big markets, the kids who play in St. Petersburg, Moscow. They're also competing in MHL teams and VHL teams that are pretty loaded with talent, and that can make climbing over one another to get those spare minutes a challenge. Whereas the kids who are playing in some of the rural communities, some of the smaller markets in the KHL, those kids are typically promoted pretty early, and they're typically given greater opportunities as well. So it's a blessing and a curse to be with a CSKA or be with an SKA, right? It's you're getting a lot of eyeballs. You're in a huge market. There's huge finances behind your club, but it can be tricky working your way up. So it's a fine line for a lot of those kids in Russia. In Sweden and Finland, less so. A lot of kids now are playing pro hockey in Finland, and Sweden's a much better league. The SHL is a much stronger league than Liga. But there's typically 7 or 8 kids who get good opportunities in the SHL, and that's just not true of the KHL. There's just maybe 1 or 2 kids a year that are getting minutes, and oftentimes, including with Yurov, who's the consensus top Russian prospect this year, and we'll get to him, but including with Yurov, it's sparse. It's here and there. You're getting a shift, and it's not good for your development, and it has proven not good for the development of many players, including recent Leafs first round pick Rodion Amirov. Before he was diagnosed with cancer, Rodion just wasn't playing, and it had been a really rough year for him, and that had nothing to do with the health. That was just his KHL club wasn't affording him an opportunity. So it's a pretty common story now with the kids in Russia.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be an issue for the Ottawa Senators, who have not drafted out of Russia since 2005. The only Russian player they've drafted was Igor Sokolov, of course, playing for Cape Breton, but they did trade for a Russian. And we got to give some stick taps to Scott's favorite. They play for the KHL championship, and Vitaly Abramov was a part of that this season. So we absolutely love it. But while we're talking about Russia, perfect transition into our 19th pick in this draft. You've got the Los Angeles Kings saying, we got ice time for you in our organization, to Danila Yurov, a guy who sat on the bench way more than he played in the KHL this year, but you saw big talent in the games he was able to play.
Yeah, there's no question. And the Kings have the deepest, bar none, the deepest prospect pool in hockey. So they feel like the perfect team to take one of Brad Lambert, Danila Yurov, or Miroshnichenko. It just feels like that's the way that they should be going about this. Because their pool is so deep, they're actually currently running into problems with the number of players who are NHL ready and the number of jobs that are available. there just isn't enough ice time to go around in LA, and there are more kids coming at all three positions. There are centers coming, there are wingers coming, and there are defensemen coming. They could stand to add a top goalie prospect, but because there isn't one in this draft class, I think they are in a great position to take a kid that may take some time, take some risk on a player, and swing big, swing for the star piece, because they have plenty of third pairing defensemen and bottom six forwards coming in their kids, more than any other team in the league, maybe by a wide margin. So they have no issue there in the next 2-3 years, just plugging and playing young kids into prominent roles or even into sort of role playing roles. And I just think it makes a lot of sense for them to take a swing on one of the three kids that's almost surely going to be available. I mean, there's almost no chance that all of Yurov, Miroshnichenko, and Lambert are off the board by the time it's their turn. And so I think if I'm sitting at that table, those are really the only three names I'm probably considering, because I think that just makes a lot of sense for them. Here, I've got them going with Yurov. Yurov is the safest of those three, at least as far as NHL projectability. It's obviously complicated, as it is for all of these kids, by the invasion in Ukraine and the practicalities of potentially getting these players over here, and the fact that they weren't at the combine and teams haven't had as much communication with them this season. All of that makes taking a Russian tricky, but because of how talented Yurov is, he's going to be extremely difficult to pass up. So I like Yurov in the late teens, early 20s. I think that's where he'll go. On talent, no question, top 10 pick in this draft if the invasion in Ukraine wasn't taking place. And I think because of that, he's likely going to slip, but he's not one of the kids who's going to slip too far, even with all of the uncertainty around getting those kids over here. And the Kings are as I said, the Kings can wait. There's no rush. If it takes him 5 years to get over here and he pulls Kirill Kaprizov and comes over when he's in the prime of his career, that's a good outcome for a team like the Kings, who are just not really in a place where they need talent right away right now. So I really like one of those three sort of risky first round picks that we expect to go in this range for the Kings. And I think Yurov is just a little bit safer than Lambert, who's obviously off the board now anyways, so it's irrelevant. And definitely, because of Miroshnichenko's health concerns, a little safer than Miroshnichenko.
So with Danila Yurov, Scott, and maybe you can enlighten us here, it's just so cloudy with who he is as a prospect, because like we talked about it, and I'll be honest, I got a little lost in the ice time conversation. That's kind of what my focus was when we profiled him. So we weren't really able to profile what kind of player he is, just because it was hard to find any information on him when 20 games, he's playing less than 1 minute of ice time in the KHL. And from your blurb in The Athletic about him, you said you're really impressed by him, and there's a lot of positives. So just enlighten us on what those really big skills that teams would be willing to take a risk on him. What are they? Like, why is he worth taking a risk when there's so many red flags and cloudy kind of reports?
Well, he's the complete package. I think teams view him as one of the most well-rounded forwards in this draft class. He's that classic power and finesse player. He's got the finesse and the touch to his game and can handle the puck, but he also really excels playing a give and go game. He's a dominant player along the wall. He's a strong, sturdy, athletic, sort of muscular kid. And then he can shoot, he can score, he can pass the puck, he can handle the puck, he can play off the puck. There's just a lot to like about him. I mean, we often, I think, get down the wrong rabbit hole with these Russian kids where they're labeled as one-dimensional and dynamic kids who struggle off the puck or struggle playing defense. And that's just not Yurov's game at all. He's a very complete offensive hockey player. And I think he projects as a top six winger at the next level, and those don't grow on trees. So I really like just what he offers. And I think if he can get more reps at the pro level, that will be huge for him. Obviously, if he goes back next year and he doesn't play and he ends up in the Rodion Amirov situation where he's just struggling to get ice time, then you start to ask serious questions about his development. But I think if you trust the talent, you trust that he's going to play more next year and that from there he'll take off. So that's what I would be banking on with him. And then he's got the track record too. I mean, despite all of the wasted time in the KHL this year, he's a dominant player the last 2 years at the MHL level for his age. He's an older player in this draft. He's a late 2003, so he's an older player in this draft. He's been on the international scene for a year longer than all of these kids because he always played up. So when these kids in the 2004 age group were playing U18s, He played the year prior with the 2003 age group. And in that 2003 age group, which he was actually really young in, he was a dominant player. He was a top point producer. He was a first line guy. So he's been a very good player in that 2003 age group internationally for Russia. And then obviously domestically at the MHL, he's one of the very best forwards in the league when he's there. So now it's simply about getting him an opportunity in the KHL to develop into what he's capable of becoming.
Fantastic breakdown. I absolutely appreciate that. Just to put a quantity to qualify what we're talking about with the lack of ice time, he dressed in the final 12 games in the KHL in the playoffs for his team. And in those 12 games, he played a total of 7 minutes, played 0 minutes in 5 of the games. And in the last 4 games, played a combined minute and 3 seconds. So just absolutely no opportunity for Danila Yurov, but certainly you could see a situation where he comes in as a 23-year-old and you've got Quinton Byfield down the middle with I don't know if Kopitar will still be there, but they've obviously got some guys coming up behind Byfield at center, and you could see him dominant pretty early as a right winger. I love how all the Russians play their off wing too. Just give me the puck, I'll put it in the back of the net. So Danila Yurov goes 19th on this mock draft to the Los Angeles Kings. Just a quick recap here of the picks we've made with Scott so far. At 16, Brad Lambert to Buffalo, Denton Mateychuk to Nashville at 17, Leon Bichsel at 18 to Dallas, and Danila Yurov to the Los Angeles Kings at 19. Now the Washington Capitals on the clock at 20. And Scott, you've got them taking what I believe is going to be another riser in the draft, a guy who might go higher than a lot of the lists say. It's Ryan Chesley from the USNTDP. Why is he the right pick here for the Washington Capitals?
Yeah, when I hinted at a player in a couple of slots when I was making my Leon Bichsel pick, a player in a couple of slots who feels like he's more well-respected by NHL scouts than he is public list, Chesley was the guy that I was hinting at. And he is a player that NHL scouts love. They feel like he's a safe, projectable pick as a potential second pairing guy who can just sort of do it all at both ends. He was on the first pairing this year at the program, played with Lane Hutson on that top pairing at even strength. But because they had Lane Hutson and Seamus Casey running their power plays, Chesley, despite being quite talented himself offensively and having one of the bigger shots in the draft, Chesley wasn't afforded the power play time that he probably would have got in almost any other year at the national program. He would have been a power play guy. That's just the type of player he is. But because of the way that things broke and the talent of Hutson and Seamus Casey, he just became their dominant minute-eating, penalty-killing, even strength guy. And in that role was tremendous. Especially as the year went on. He got up to a bit of a slow start. He was a highly touted prospect growing up. He was one of the 04s that every agent, if you talk to agents about these kids, Chesley was one of the 04s that every agent was after, along with the Brad Lamberts and the Shane Wrights and the big names back in the day, right? Chesley was the guy. He was the kid that was going to go to the program and become the star. And there's some name value that has carried with him through that into the draft process. So teams are obviously certainly fond of him. They're well aware of him. They know him. And then on top of that, he's got the size, he's got the skating, he's physical, he plays a pro style already. And I think there's a real belief that he'll be not a one and done defender, because almost none are in college, but he'll be out of college in 2 or 3 years and playing in the NHL, and teams are really confident in that kind of a projection. So Chesley just feels like another guy that's going to rise up the board. And I've often argued that defenders aren't taken nearly enough in these mock drafts. So with 3 of my 5 picks here, I'm trying to right the ship a little bit. But as far as Washington goes, I also think he just makes sense for the Capitals. They're another team. They've taken McMichael and Lapierre with their recent first-round picks. Last year, they obviously didn't have a first-round pick, and they tried to correct against having taken so many forwards in years prior by taking 3D with their first 3 picks. But none of those D, I mean, Vincent Iorio is a legit prospect and will be on the World Junior team in all likelihood in December in Halifax for Team Canada. But beyond Iorio, and even Iorio, he's not the level of prospect that Ryan Chesley is. So I really think they'd be fun to add a sort of blue chip D prospect. And he's another guy, because of his proximity to the NHL, who makes sense for a team like the Capitals as they try to extend their competitive window here.
Yeah, they're going to be trying to get guys into play with Ovechkin while he's still hanging around chasing Gretzky's goal record. And I'm sure who knows how long that'll take. So that'll be very interesting. And Ryan Chesley is a guy that we both like when we profiled him. He really seems like like as far as a right shot defenseman goes, he kind of seems like a great two-way option. And you mentioned he didn't get that power play, but my kind of feeling is that since he wasn't on the power play and that wasn't his bread and butter, he worked a lot more on the defensive side of his game, which really improved. And then who knows, maybe he gets into a spot where he gets some power play time and he's able to improve on that as well. Would you say Chesley is kind of, after obviously the two big right shot defensemen that are going to go in the top 10, would you say he's probably the next right-hand shot guy that is going to be looked at here for defensemen?
He's definitely in that next group. And it's funny you mentioned the D piece of the puzzle and working on that, because I surveyed this talented group of forwards. And this is a almost historically strong group of forwards coming out of the program this year. They're going to have close to 10 forwards drafted in the first round, maybe. At least 6 or 7 for sure. Yeah. And I asked them all at U18 World, one after the other, who's the defender on the team who's the toughest to go against in practice. And I think one of them said Charlie Leddy, just because Charlie's such a physical presence. But to a T, the other 6, 7, 8 of them that I surveyed all said Ryan Chesley, and just his ability to gap up, defend with his stick, and then sort of start in a defensive posture that defends with his stick, but then also have that physicality to fall back on if the stick or the gap loosens or something falls apart, defending one-on-one. So yeah, just a kid that makes a lot of sense. And he's got that right-handedness, which teams, whether they'll tell you or not, they still covet the righties more than the lefties if they can get them. So there is a little bit of an added premium there in Chesley.
Okay, so I'm not doing this to poke the bear, and everyone will have to wait to hear Scott's full interview coming up with us next week. But does he have some Jake Sanderson qualities in him?
A little bit.
The way you described how he kind of everything's smooth, it seems, with him.
Yeah, and very athletic. Jake was always a kid who was just a sturdy, well-built defender, and everything just kind of happened in front of him. And it's the same with Chesley. It never feels like he's chasing it. The game is always in front of him. He's very comfortable defensively in his posture. His feet don't look scrambly. He's just with his defenders and sort of watching his marks, and the game just sort of settles down when he's on the ice defensively. A little bit more erratic, I would say, offensively than Jake was at the same age, and certainly than Jake is now. Jake has developed a real poise to his game. Chesley is more of a sort of, he's aggressive when it's there. He loves to step off the line and use that big shot that I talked about, and probably has a better shot at this age than Sanderson had, but just a little bit more sort of one-dimensional. He makes that first move and attacks, and that's pretty much the end of his offensive sequence. So he can beat the first guy, and he can exit the zone. He can escape pressure, but it's not going to happen in layers after that. And the beauty of what Jake has developed is that Jake can make the long play now. Instead of just making that quick, aggressive early play, Jake has learned to really hang onto the puck. You'll see him swinging around the offensive zone and rotating behind the net with the puck. And all of that has become a real element to Jake's game that Chesley doesn't really have.
Well, your first line on it right up for Ryan Chesley is one of the most university well-liked prospects in this draft among NHL folks, which, I mean, you reiterated there a little bit, but where do you think the highest point we could see Ryan Chesley go off the board?
I think you could see him go to Nashville and Dallas at 17, 18. So this does feel like kind of the limit for him. I don't think you'll see him go sort of 14, 15. That just does feel a little high. I think people recognize that he's just going to be a 20-minute a night sort of second pairing guy. And I think if you're drafting in the top 10, top 15, you're really looking for maybe that guy who can be 22, 23 minutes for you. But after that, I think right there, Dallas, I would consider him there. Nashville, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think both of those teams are going to take defensemen. So if it's not Dallas or Nashville, I don't think he's going to be around long. And I do firmly believe that Ryan Chesley is going to be taken in round 1.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Scott, because looking at your mock draft that you did recently, you have 3 of these players in this range. You've just had them at different spots here, so you definitely have an eye for where they're going to go, in your opinion. And you get 3 defensemen and then 2 boom or bust, high risk, high rewards guys, forwards mixed in here. So this has been a very interesting group of 5 prospects we're taking a look at here.
100%. And I want to end off with this. And Scott, we can't thank you enough. Everyone should be subscribed already to The Athletic, and you get mock drafts, you get all the insight. How many pages, if it were to be a book, is your rankings?
it's about 25,000 words, my ranking, and it's 250 pages or 250 words a page in a book. So you do the math. It's 100
Not
pages.
math guys on this show.
100 pages. I like that. Yeah.
Nice round number. That's awesome. So the final question, and again, we appreciate your time, Scott, and everyone can come back next week. Scott's interview will air with us here on Locked On Senators. Great to have you back as a friend of the show. It really is. Now, speaking of best, who are the best players on this list still available as we go into the 20s into this draft class?
Yeah, so I think you'll see after a lot of D go in a cluster in the teens, I think you're going to see a number of forwards begin to be picked in the 20s. I would look at names like Yuri Kulich, who obviously was a star at U18 Worlds for Czechia, really established himself as one of the best forward prospects in this draft. Kulich can play all three forward positions and has a bomb of a one-timer that really threatens on the power play. So I think you'll see guys like Kulich, guys like Noah Ostlund, another standout from U18 Worlds for Sweden. They went down to three centers at U18 Worlds, and he double shifted and looked like a sort of top two-way center, despite only being a sort of skinny 5'10", 5'11" guy. He's got some flair and some of that dynamic quality that you expect out of a player who's sort of light on his skates and smaller, but also just an extremely talented two-way player. So I think you'll see players like Austin, Yuri Kulich, Jagger Firkus is another name that's going to be gone, I expect, shortly with as you guys proceed through the mock draft here. And then on D, players like Owen Pickering. I considered Pickering when I took my 3D in this range. Pickering's a kid who sprouted up 9 inches in the span of a couple of years and went from being one of the smallest players on his team to a sort of giant, skinny player. And he's still just a beautiful, at 6'4", just a beautiful, beautiful, effortless skater. And teams I know fell in love with Owen Pickering at the Combine. He's one of the kids that interviewed the best in terms of just personality, how well liked he was by teams in that setting. So Pickering's a kid that I expect will go in the 20s here. But there's a long list. This is when things, after these guys I've just selected, this is when things start to really widen out. And then obviously the X factor in this next range for you guys, as you guys proceed through this with a couple more folks here, is Ivan Miroshnichenko. I really do think he is the player left now that Lambert and Yurov are off the board. He's the player left that just could sort of shape an organization if all works well for him, and if he can get healthy and his Hodgkin's lymphoma and get into remission and just feel himself again. So obviously the health is a major question mark, and that's the most important thing with him as he moves forward in his life here. But if hockey can enter back into the forefront as a focus, and Miroshnichenko can get back on track, he might be a top of the lineup player. So the team that drafts him in the 20s or early 30s is taking a risk, but the reward could be huge if he can get healthy.
So the Los Angeles Kings in our mock draft are taking Danila Yurov, and the Washington Capitals are taking Ryan Chesley. Now the team with, I would say, the worst prospect pool in hockey, the Pittsburgh Penguins, are on the clock. And here to help us make the next 5 selections, it's a very good friend of the show, the best bald analyst in the entire industry. It's Tony Ferrari. Welcome back to Locked On Senators. How are you doing today, man?
Oh, I'm back. I'm happy, and I'm ready to get some mock drafting done because it's a fun time of year. So why not get a little crazy?
And not only that, but you finally have the opportunity to go to the draft after back-to-back virtual years. And you said this is about as crazy of a draft class as possible, especially when we get to this range, eh? Like, how many options can go from 20 to 25?
40. And like, that's being conservative. I'm not being crazy either. Like this year, it feels like there's like a top 4 or 5 that have kind of solidified themselves. And then it's 40 guys that can realistically go anywhere between 5 and 45, 50. Like, it's going to be wild. Like, there's going to be guys that people on notable lists, whether it's Craig Button or Bob McKenzie, myself, Cam Robinson, EP. Like, they're going to have guys that are in the top 15 that go at 65. And it's just going to be like, all right, like, I can see it. I understand why, I guess.
Yeah, my favorite is when you're watching the draft and as it's happening, you're like, my best player available has slid for 10 consecutive picks. How is no one taking this guy? And you start losing your mind. But that's why it's fun, and that's why we do mock drafts, so we can look back and be like, we weren't even close.
Not even close. Well, hey, the Pittsburgh Penguins are far from having the best prospect pool. Not even close, one could say. So at 21st overall, Tony, we're going to go with Philip Mesar, and he just brings a little bit of everything to their prospect pool. Why do you like him here for the Penguins?
I'm really high on Mesar. He's a guy that I think isn't really getting the love he deserves. He's incredibly intelligent. He's projectable. He has a lot of the tools. I look at him a lot of the same ways that I look at a guy like Marco Kasper, who everyone seems to be pushing into the top 10, top 15 right now. But I think Mesar has more skill, more high-end ability, and the actual ability to be a true top 6 forward. And yes, he doesn't really – I don't know if he projects as a center the way kind of Kasper does. But this is a guy that's going to play a pro-ready game. He plays smart at the Slovakian level now, and I love the kid. He does so many things, whether it's cutting to the middle, getting to the inside with just shifty little moves, working off the boards. He's not the biggest guy, but he understands how to play the game in the small spaces, and that's such an important trait in today's NHL. So having the speed, having the skill, and having the ability to do all those things, he just kind of makes the right play at the right time, and that's the kind of player an NHL team needs. And when you're the Pittsburgh Penguins and your best prospect is you or I, you might as well take a guy that you know you're going to get an NHL player out of him.
I'm not playing for the Penguins after they beat the Sens 5 out of 6 times in the playoffs. I'm good. Pilsy?
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh is at a point where they need to be just looking to try to hit not a home run, but they need a single or maybe a double. They're just focusing on that. And I think Mesar, he's a guy that's great in transition. I think he can add a lot to this prospect pool that is very, very shallow. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense for the Penguins.
Who are a couple other guys you're considering in this spot, Tony?
Noah Östlund's still on the board, so he's a guy that I think has a ton of upside. I really like him. A guy like Seamus Casey is that home run swing potential as well here. Like there's a number of guys, but I think when you're looking at Pittsburgh's prospect pool, they need a guy that has that upside, but also has kind of some insurance. So don't take the swing for the home run here for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
It's a nice safe pick there with Mesar, and we're going with him with the Pittsburgh Penguins at 21st overall. Now it gets interesting because I absolutely love what the Anaheim Ducks have done in recent years, especially with their first-round picks, from Trevor Zegras all the way to Mason McTavish, with a little bit of Jamie Drysdale sprinkled in the mix there in 2020. So they've got some flexibility here as they enter the next stage in their rebuild. Who do we like here, Tony? Because I gave you a couple options, and we settled on a guy you just said missed out on the pick by Pittsburgh just by an inch.
Yeah, and that's Noah Östlund. He's a guy that I think has an incredibly high ceiling. He plays center, has so much skill, the ability to kind of do so many different things on the ice, extremely dynamic. The biggest thing with him is he hasn't really put it together at the pro level this year. You look at his Djurgården teammates and Liam Ogren and Jonathan Lekkerimäki, and they both excelled at the SHL. I don't want to say excelled, but they both played quite well at the SHL level. Noah Östlund still kind of struggling a little bit. He's still a junior superstar, an absolute stud there. And when you watch him play at international events, he struggled in years past, but this year he looks really, really good. So he's taking that step. He's got so much, like I said, so much skill, so much upside, and he does play center. I think he projects to be a center at the next level. This is the kind of guy that the Ducks kind of bring in, and they're not afraid to swing on the high-end Swedes. They're not afraid to kind of take a chance, especially at this stage of the draft. This is a guy to me that I see no downside in taking him, especially this late. For me, he's a top 15 guy.
Now, for Noah Östlund, and we talked to other people about this, he was obviously a part of that trio, that Djurgården trio. How well do you think he can play away from his two buddies in Lekkerimäki and Ogren? Like, do you think he's going to be able to still have that success without those type of line mates with him?
Yeah, I do. I think he can, because I think Lekkerimäki's probably the guy that relies on teammates the least, and that's because he plays a very simple sniper kind of put the puck away, be the finisher kind of game. No, Liam Ogren's the guy that kind of does the dirty work, goes in forechecks, and does so many of those pro tendencies, a little bit like we were talking about with Philip Mesar there. But Noah Östlund's the play driver. He's the guy that gets creative. He's the one that makes guys around him better. And that's why of the three of them, I have them back to back to back on my board. And he's the one that I have with the highest upside. And he's the one that at the end of the day, that's always kind of where I lean. And he's the one that leads the pack for me of those three.
Yeah, that's, I mean, any three of them would be great. They're all going to go in the first round probably. So I think if you're a team this late in the first round and one of these guys falls to you, you're going to be pretty excited about that.
And there is a fourth member of Djurgården. Defenseman Calle Odelius is in the mix in this range. Now, with our next pick, we're going to St. Louis, and we decided we didn't even give Tony the option. we need a defenseman for the St. Louis Blues. Over the past few years, they focused on forward. They do have a kind of hidden gem there. I'm blanking on the name. Who's the kid that won a couple of championships? Perunovic, right?
Yep.
So they've got one stud on the back end, but we think that that's the play here, is to add another layer on the back end. However, we're not going with Odelius. With the 23rd pick, the St. Louis Blues are going to select Owen Pickering, who I just found out the other day is Denton Mateychuk's cousin. So they're getting a little bit of back and forth of who should be taken earlier. We went with Mateychuk yesterday with Denton or with the Nashville Predators, but here with St. Louis, what would Owen Pickering bring at this position?
A little bit of everything and a little bit of uncertainty as well. This is the kid that has the tools to do so many things and you're still going to wondering what is exactly he's going to be at the next level. He is the size, the skating ability, and I think a lot of that is credit to the fact that he was a smaller player growing up. He wasn't a guy that was this huge hulking defenseman like he is now. He wasn't 6'4" growing up. He was a 5'10" guy when he got drafted, if I'm not mistaken, or even 5'9" into the WHL. So he played that small, skilled, push the pace kind of game from the back end. And then he had this growth spurt. And now he's this big hulking defenseman who can play physically at times and kind of still has the skating ability and dynamism to his game. So you look at a guy like this and you're like, there's so much here that could go right, that could make him the best WHL to come out of this draft, maybe even one of the top 2 or 3 defensemen to come out of this draft. So this is a swing on upside, a swing on the raw ability, but the ways that this guy's put his game together at times this year, you see these flashes of like just absolute greatness, and you're like, man, if you can get him at 23, which is exactly where I have him ranked, you're loving it. You're absolutely loving getting this guy this late.
Now, is this the type of guy, Tony, that the offense is amazing, but on the other hand, defensively, he really struggles? Is this the kind of scenario where you're like, look, we'll take a prospect that has these natural offensive talents and we'll just stick with the coachable defensive aspects of it, and through time with development, we think we can work those out and kind of meet more in the middle here? Or is it the type of player where you're just like, you know what, we're just going to let him loose offensively and take the good with the bad here?
No, I think this is a guy that has some defensive upside because we've seen him kind of grow throughout the year on that side of the puck. And like I said, he was a smaller offensive guy growing up. Once he got that size and everything, he's starting to use it a little bit more. He's understanding that he can use his reach. And while he doesn't need to blow guys up, despite the fact that he is 6'4", and when he gets to the NHL, probably will play at over 200 pounds, he's going to be able to use that reach, lead with the stick, poke the puck free, and then use that skating ability that he developed as a smaller, younger player to really make a difference as a two-way defenseman. So I think the upside with him is like a legitimate two-way defenseman that can affect the game at both ends of the ice. And then you're looking at it and you're like, okay, if that doesn't work out, we still have this offensive guy who can do a lot of things on the power play or at 5-on-5, moving the puck up the ice.
So Pickering, great pick here. I like it. Maybe a little bit longer road. Maybe, what do you say, 3-4 years before he starts to get a sniff at the NHL level?
Yeah, he probably has a couple of years that you're like, okay, like he's got WHL eligibility obviously left, like every draft prospect does, and then a year or two at the AHL level, and you're going, okay, get those pro tendencies when you're at the AHL level, kind of work your way up, prove to us that you're ready, and then you'll get to the NHL. And a guy like him and Scott Perunovic kind of playing on that same back end, you're getting a lot of really good fun offensive traits. And like I said, with this guy, you have some really high end defensive upside too.
So out of the other players, and I noticed that Vladimir Grudinin is a guy who you're a lot higher on than most. And you said there's such a wide range of guys who could be considered. Out of, let's say, Grudinin, Sam Renzel is another really raw prospect, or a guy who's a little more well-rounded like Seamus Casey. Who would be your next best option here if St. Louis is going to go defenseman but decides against Owen Pickering?
I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because I'd say Sam Renzel, but it's because of there are a lot of the same players,
yeah,
like big, rangy, high-end skaters and stuff like that. But if you go with a guy like Casey, you're getting all this fun offensive upside that hasn't really been able to show itself this year. It's been a little bit of an interesting year for Casey because he is this offensive defenseman. He has so many of these really cerebral traits in the offensive zone, and his defensive game is kind of starting to come along as well. And he did show so many more traits of being that two-way guy this year, but it kind of came out of the sacrifice for his offense. So he's a guy that I'm looking for next year when he goes to college. See where that offensive game's at. Really kind of push that, because if that offensive game isn't there, Casey starts to kind of move down the board a little bit.
Very interesting. So good call. I like where we're going with Owen Pickering, a high upside swing for the St. Louis Blues here at 23rd. Obviously, we're keeping Tony through the Toronto Maple Leafs pick. I really am curious which way he's going to go with that. But first, it's the Minnesota Wild at 24. And we know they're in an interesting spot where they've kind of capped themselves into a corner over the next 2 years with the buyouts to Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. But they do have the next generation already established with the Marco Rossi's and Matt Boldy's of the world. So I wasn't sure whether they were going to lead forward or defense with this pick. Tony, where are we going with 24 with the Minnesota Wild?
We're going with Yuri Kulich. He's a guy that has a ton of offensive game. We saw him light up the world under 18s. He's got the incredible shot. I think his playmaking ability is a little bit underrated. We didn't get to see that as much at the U18s, but he absolutely tore that tournament up on the power play. He's a guy that I think adds a little bit more of that offensive flair, offensive punch that Minnesota's starting to get with guys like Fiala, who I know you guys are going to be wanting to get in Ottawa pretty soon and everything. And like Kaprizov, Boldy, Rossi, all these guys that they have coming. They're starting to get out of that boring, mushy middle Minnesota team that we're so used to for the last 20 years, basically since they've come to existence. And they're starting to become offensive. They're starting to become exciting again. And I think a guy like Yuri Kulich adding to that team where he's not going to have to come in and be this two-way forward that does a little bit of everything. He's going to be a guy that's able to kind of come in, play the game that he plays, that offensive game, and absolutely tear it up on the power play and be an asset offensively and be a difference maker there. So I think Kulich would be a really, really interesting pick for the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, he definitely has that flair on the power play. His one-timer is just absolutely lethal. Now, do you think he's going to be the kind of player, though, that maybe you won't be able to excel 5-on-5, or does he have skills to make him more than just kind of a power play one-timer specialist?
Yeah, I think he does have more skill than what he's kind of given credit for, because I was watching his game at the U18s and he was creating a lot of chances at the U18s, making a lot of plays, but he absolutely tore it up on the power play. And that's not something I necessarily saw on when he was playing in the Czech League and everything. So I think he does have the ability to create plays and do a lot of things, work himself into the corners and really kind of be a guy that does a little bit more than what he was doing at the U18s. But at the same time, you're looking at a guy here where you're like, okay, if things don't work out on 5-on-5, we have a third liner who can kind of provide some energy, kind of score depth, and then be an absolute terror on the power play.
I love your line here. We should point everyone in the direction, and we're going to have Tony on for a full interview coming up next week on Locked On Senators. And, of course, you can find his top 50 on wingedwheelpodcast.com. Actually, that's just one half of it because you did do a top 100. So wingedwheelpodcast.com, Tony Ferrari's full list. And I love your opening line on Yuri Kulich. Seeing the young Czech forward getting some love because of the World Under 18s was fun. Seeing many people disregard the fact that most of his scoring, 8 out of 9 goals, came on a lethal power play was less fun. Now, my question to you from that, and 9 goals in 6 games is incredible no matter how you slice it. Is he still going in this range for you if he, let's say, doesn't produce at such an exceptional level at that tournament?
Yeah, he was a guy I had in the top 20 kind of all year. And then when we're starting to see the U18 scoring, everyone was like, oh, man, this guy that's been in our second round, he deserves to go in the top 20 now. And I'm like, yeah, guys, watch the Czech League once in a while and you'll see it. It's just one of those guys that I think it's not the easiest thing in the world to watch the Czech League and everything. And at the end of the day, it's not the funnest thing in the world to watch the Czech League. So I'm not shocked that it took the U18s and a coming out party for him to kind of move up the rankings.
And you love that he wore the C at that tournament as well. And of course, the country like Czech Republic doesn't have the depth as you would in the Swedens, Canadas, America. I get that. But still some leadership quality. You like that for a team that's kind of built on, you mentioned they're getting out of that era, but I mean, they still have their kind of meat and potatoes leadership core of the Marcus Folignos and even Joel Eriksson-Ek, a little bit of flash, but still kind of that tough presence. Jordan Greenway, another guy. But to add him into the mix with all those guys, certainly a ton of talent with Yuri Kulich. Do you think he projects as a center or winger at the NHL level?
I think he probably ends up being a winger. I think it's just the fact that he can play really well in space, and I like him down the middle, but it's probably the two-way game that might hurt him. He does play, when he plays engaged and when he's really going and using his energy, he can do some good things defensively. But I like him working off the boards. I like him kind of working into space rather than being in space, and I think that's why I think he probably projects as a winger at the next level.
Love it, though. It's a great pick. And one who I feel like this is the type of pick where the Toronto Maple Leafs might be like, oh, darn, we had Kulich high on our list as well. But now we are at the Toronto Maple Leafs pick, 25th overall. And we know they don't have a second-round pick. I don't even know if they have a third. So they better make this one count. And, of course, it's out of his control. And we're wishing the best of health to Rodion Amirov. But it's kind of questionable of what happened with their first-rounder from last year. So which direction do the Toronto Maple Leafs go here? Kyle Dubas and his team of 1,000 analytic experts.
Well, I don't think it's going to shock anybody that they're going to go with an undersized forward. And it's Jagger Firkus, my boy from the WHL, winger, absolute video game type player. He's the kind of guy that will windmill deke and then absolutely snipe it on a goalie. I think when I remember watching him live at the Top Prospects game, he walked in on a defenseman, fake to the outside, defenseman bit, he put the puck around him, just absolutely walked into the slot and then just fired it from 20 feet out. I think most people in the arena thought it went off the post and out and no goal, but it just went right to the back post, right out of the net. It was just such a clean shot. He knew it went in, his arms went up, and that's the kind of player this kid is. He's an absolute stud, can rip it. He's got maybe the best hands in the draft. That's the thing with this guy. He's a guy that so many times you think the puck's about to be off his stick, and then he's in space and he's away from two of the defenders that were just on him, and it's puck's still there. He's got maybe the best puck control in the entire draft, and I think that combined with the fact that he's such a lethal shooter can really, really make him an excellent player at the next level, and a guy that I think the Leafs could use kind of filling out one of those spots in the top 6 in a couple of years or in the middle 6.
So there's two parts of this graphic that I want to touch on, because the first one that jumps out is 153 pounds. He weighed in at the Combine. You can't play at the NHL at that level as a forward, I don't think. But again, then you see at the bottom, he's grown 5 inches over the last 3 years. So is this a guy where, yeah, you're banking on that high reward, but you're going to have to be patient with his development?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty typical Leafs pick, I think. It's a guy that you look at and you go, Mitch Marner wasn't weighing too much up more than that. I think he was 167 in his draft year. And obviously Mitch Marner's a higher end talent, but a guy like Firkus, I remember talking to him earlier in the year when I interviewed him, and he just straight up admitted, he's like, yeah, you know what? I was a little bit intimidated to go into the gym for my first couple of years, my first little bit in the WHL, because I was this really scrawny guy. I was this smaller guy, and I wasn't prepared to kind of work out with the bigger guys that were on the team and everything. So he said this year he's gotten way more comfortable in the gym. He's put on a few pounds himself. He's a guy that he said over the summer, his entire focus is going to be just trying to put on some muscle, put on some weight, and just become a little bit harder to play against in that regard, while still maintaining that agility, the speed, and the elusiveness that he has in his game. So you look at him like you look at a Mitch Marner or even a Rodion Amirov or some of these other players throughout the league, even a Tim Stützle. You don't want to get too bulky, because if you get too bulky, it takes away some of the really high-end aspects of your game. But you do need to get bigger than 153 pounds, because you'll get thrown through the boards or thrown over the boards at this point.
I'm pretty sure Carlson was around 150 when he was drafted as well. So It's not like it's a complete death sentence at all.
Yeah, and there's time to grow. Like these are young men here. They're gonna grow into that size. I mean, he grew 5 inches, so he's shown that his body's able to grow some more. Now it just needs to grow.
Growth plates, Felzy? Growth plates.
Growth plates. They're there. Don't ignore them. That's what the parents will tell you. But Tony, I'm glad that you mentioned the video game like aspect, because I see when I'm watching Firkus kind of like shades of Kent Johnson, and that's the exact quote we loved using for Kent Johnson. So This just seems like such a Leafs type pick for me here. But where I get some concern with Firkus, and I love watching him because it's exciting, is the fact that sure, you're able to pull off all these incredible moves up against lesser competition, but when you get to the pros, you lose half a second on every play. Some of these guys are going to be 50, 60, 70 pounds more.
Tony, he's going to have to get around Tyler Clevin. He's going to have to.
Yeah.
He's going to have to.
Good luck
I'm going to say no comment on that one. I'm just not going to piss off all the Sens
fans. Yeah, that's we'll save that for another time. But my concern is he going to be able to pull off some of these stunts at the pro level, or is it going to be obvious that he's someone that's relied on his pure talent, and up against his peers, he's able to do it, but when it comes time to go to the pros, it might not work out?
I think there's always risk with guys like this. I think there was a risk with Kent Johnson like that too. And I think you saw him adjust a little bit at Michigan in his time there. And a guy like Firkus is going to have to adjust over the next couple of years as he plays in the WHL. And the one thing I will say about Firkus is the fact that he's not playing in the QMJHL or even the OHL is a big thing for me with a guy like this, because if we're just being honest, the WHL is a tougher league to play against. It's not necessarily the best league. I think the OHL is the best of the three. The WHL is the toughest of the three, and the QMJHL doesn't play defense, so that's cool. But no, I think him playing in the WHL is a big thing. It shows that he can play up against guys like Caden Gooley, who will throw a big hit, or these other big defensemen in that league who will absolutely take your head off just for the fun of it, because that's what that league does a lot of times. So it's a guy that I think he's in a good spot to develop that. And then, like I said, with a guy like Noah Ausland, like or a couple other guys we've talked about, a year or two in the AHL is probably realistic for this guy. I think getting used to the physicality, and I think a lot of times when I've talked to people who have played in the AHL and the NHL, they go, oh, the AHL is a more physical league. Like, you get beat up in the AHL. And that's why sometimes these guys go down there and they'll have 60 points in a season, and then they get to the NHL and they're scoring 80. And it's because at that level, you're having to deal with so much more of that physical presence down there. I think William Nylander was an excellent example of that. You look at some of the Senators that have come up through the AHL. They're great examples of that, where, yeah, their scoring totals don't look outstanding down at the AHL level. Then when they get to the NHL level, you're like, oh, I didn't know they had this in them. It's because they're not getting chased down by a 35-year-old trying to keep his career alive at the same time. So I think he's a guy that when he gets to the pro level, he's going to play in the AHL for a year or two and really just develop there as well. Because like you said, the strength is going to be an issue. Learning what you can and can't do, because some of those video game qualities just won't work. Like the windmill deke that you love seeing and stuff, that's going to work 1 out of 15 times at the NHL level. And it's going to work 1 out of 20. Yeah. Oh, it's the best to watch. Right. And a guy like Ken Johnson's going to have to deal with that at the NHL level too. So you look at guys like that and you're like, yeah, I'd rather a guy learn how to rein things in a little bit than a guy have to learn how to do anything. And that's what I like about a guy like Firkus.
100%. So far, we've got the Pittsburgh Penguins taking Philip Machar. We've got the Anaheim Ducks at 22, taking Noah Ausland. At 23, Owen Pickering to St. Louis. Yuri Kulich to the Minnesota Wild. And the Toronto Maple Leafs selecting Jaeger Firkus from the Moose Jaw Warriors. Tony, before we get you out of here, who is your best player available still on the board right now?
Ooh, my best player available still on the board is probably Vladimir Grudinin, the Russian defenseman. I am higher on him than most people, and I think looking at some of the other boards, I think Will Scouch is maybe the only other person that has him this high. And he's a guy that I think is probably one of the most interesting defenders in the draft. He's such a good transition defenseman. He does so many things off defensively that are just smart plays. He's not going to blow you up. He's not a 6'5" guy or anything, but he's plays such an intelligent game. And then when he's moving the puck out of the offensive zone, he's maybe one of the most efficient at doing it. So I think that's where you really find the value with him. He pushes the pace of play. And then the offensive zone, you see flashes of ability. So I think he's a guy that could be really intriguing in this range. But with everything going on with Russia, with everything going on with just him being an undersized defenseman, there are probably things that are going to push him down the board a little bit.
Yeah, the other guy who you're really high on is Gleb Trikazov. We know it's kind of a cult classic or cult hero of this draft class. But again, with the Russian factor, who knows? One thing that is for sure, barring a trade, is that the Leafs will pick immediately ahead of the Montreal Canadiens. I love when there's that divisional rivalry. You look back year after year and say, y'all passed on this guy. Of course, Senators fans are pretty familiar with that with the 3rd and 4th overall picks in 2018. Montreal Canadiens at home with their 2nd pick in the 1st round are on the clock. And here to help us make the pick for the Montreal Canadiens and picks 26 through 30, we have Jerome Berube from hockeyprospect.com. They put out their black book. It's a must grab every single year. Just head to hockeyprospect.com and you'll be able to find it yourself. In-depth prospect profiles and a whole lot more, including their rankings, which are unbelievable. I got to say, I just made my list the other day. Pilsy, I know you're making one too. And mine, I would say, are pretty level with what they're doing at hockeyprospect.com. Jerome, welcome to Locked On Senators. I feel like it's a long time coming, man.
Yes, man. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. We've been chatting for a while now, so finally part of the show now.
Yes, absolutely. And we figure a mock draft, the perfect way to get your opinions out there on some players as well as promote the hockeyprospect.com book. Because like I asked this to everyone, but it really amazes me how much effort prospect analysts put into their craft each and every year, because you're starting from scratch. You throw out everything you know about those players that have already been drafted. You shoo them on to the next level. You keep tabs on them. But every year, how does the process go from tip to tail of how you put this book together?
Well, so a lot of viewings, a lot of live viewings. Video viewing is really improving over the last, 3, 4, 5 years. So yeah, I mean, we're lucky at Hockey Prospect. We cover the OHL draft, the QMJHL draft. So we have like somewhat of a base of who to watch and who to not watch at the same time. So yeah, we have a good base with that, and then we start in the summer. The Olympia tournament starts in August, and then slowly we start building our list. And the book we only start working the book around February, March, but it's a intense 3-4 months at the end of the year.
And when you're done the book, I was just looking through the Black Book today, a lot of information for those of you that aren't familiar. There is a lot of pages, a lot of words, a lot of great opinions and analysis. When you finally finish the book, how much time do you get to just enjoy it and relax until you're like, okay, now we got to start thinking about next year? Like, is it like a good amount of time where you're like, okay, that was a great job, let's take it easy? Or is it like, as soon as it's published, it's like, okay, that was great, let's get going here?
Well, I mean, this year, like we're late June now. We have camp in August. So like the LNK tournament, like the World Junior Part 2 is in August. So there's not much time off. And last year was the same. Like the summer, it's like 1 month maybe, and then we're back. And so it's since the pandemic, honestly, it's been kind of a hectic with like the summers, but I think we're slowly getting back to a normal schedule now. So we're pretty happy about it.
Before we get to the mock draft, and we're doing picks for the Montreal Canadiens, their second first rounder after they selected in our mock draft Shane Wright at first overall. The Arizona Coyotes, it will be their second pick after selecting Juraj Slafkovsky in our mock draft. The Buffalo Sabres, who will be making their third first-round pick in our mock draft, they took Joakim Kemell and Brad Lambert. The Edmonton Oilers making their first and only selection the first round, and the Winnipeg Jets making their second selection after selecting Connor Geekie, almost said Morgan, in the middle of the first round. But before we get to all that, Jerome, just an opinion-based question here. Forget your rankings. Who is your favorite player to watch in this draft class? Who gets you fired up out of your seat out of watching these players?
So he's not like he's not ranked number 1 or number 2, but I absolutely love to watch Liam Biskel play. He is so awesome. He's the most physical player in the draft. He's so entertaining, and like what he did in the second half of the year in the SHL against men, I was kind of blown away. His physicality, like men, 32 years old player didn't want to go in the same corner as he was. So he's a lot of fun to watch. So I like physical hockey. So Biskel gets my vote as my favorite player in the draft.
Oh yeah, we love that too, and we had a lot of good words to say about Big Shell as well, because a guy with his size and that's already playing in a pro league,
mean streak too,
very mean
he's
streak.
Nasty.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well, he's already off the board. He was selected in this mock draft by the Dallas Stars. So in the teens, do you expect that to be about where he goes, in somewhere between 11 and 19?
Yeah, definitely. I think he's going to go much higher than people might think, based on some rankings that I saw. But I think mid first is pretty accurate for him.
So I need to follow up with that then. There's kind of that second tier of defenders in this draft when you're looking at like Pickering, Mateychuk, even Minchikov, a few of those other guys. Where would Bichsel get into that mix for you?
So we had a pretty good debate in our meetings between him and Pickering. So we're like, I don't know if they end up being back to back on our list. I don't.
You've got Gleb Trikazov just in between.
Okay. So I think we have Biskel, Trikazov, Pickering on our list. So yeah, they were pretty close. Pickering is really raw, so there's some hope that but I don't know. We just love Biskel. There's not many players like that anymore. So when you can get one, you just go get it. He's very like an old school type of player. So and then you mentioned Menchikov. We love Menchikov. We think he's as good as Jiricek and Nemec. So we rank him like I think 5th overall.
5.
Yeah,
you've got him before Nemec.
It won't happen at the draft. Trust me.
No, but I like that. That's a spicy meatball right there. You've got Jiricek, Minchikov, Nemec as your top three defenders, the only defenders before Korchinski comes in at 13.
Yeah. No, we love him. We love him. Obviously, it's not a mock draft. I mean, we should maybe make some T-shirt. It's not a mock draft. But you know, we don't care, honestly. Like we rank them where we think they should go. I mean, 2018 we ranked Dobson 5th and he went 12th, and I think we're looking pretty good with that one.
Where'd you have Brady Tkachuk?
Number
3. All right. All right.
I like that.
That passes the sniff test right there.
Yeah.
Hey, Phils?
Oh, yeah. That's good. That's good.
I love it. I feel like we should be doing a full interview with Jerome later this summer because
Absolutely.
I feel like you're pretty high on the Sens prospect pool, eh? Like compared to others outside.
Well, listen, the 220 draft, like the day one draft, was like a dream draft for, as I'm concerned with, like Stutzle, Sanderson, and Craig. Like, come on.
Yes.
Like,
all right. Yeah. Recurring guest. Yeah,
yes.
Definitely. Yeah. We'll have you back on, Jerome.
Yeah. Day 2 was not as good, but, you know.
They got vibes on day 2, though. When you get mixing Igor Sokolov, you know, you get the vibes on day 2. Yeah. 100%.
Sokolov is pretty good, and I think I messed up that one ranking wise, but it happens.
With the double overager too, it's not easy. But all right, we'll save this for the rest of the summer. But a nice little teaser of what's to come. Jerome Berube quickly going to become a friend of the show. You can follow him over on Twitter as well, and hockeyprospect.com. Their black book is on sale right now, and it is worth every single cent that you will be putting towards that. It'll make you a smarter hockey fan, not only for the draft, but all this information will be prevalent going into next season and beyond as these prospects look to make their way into the National Hockey League. The Montreal Canadiens are looking to change the script that has been their lack of player development over the past few years. We've seen top picks shipped out early. Sergachev, who's even a forgotten guy there, who kind of got shipped out even before making as much of an impact as Kotkaniemi, but that's 2 guys out. We've already taken Shane Wright at number 1. Now here at 26, looking at your list at hockeyprospect.com, this must have been a pretty easy pick. Who do you have Montreal taking at 26 overall?
Yeah, so the sound you're hearing is me sprinting to the stage to make that pick. Yeah. My pick is Roger McGorty from the U.S. national team. No-brainer pick. I believe he's 11 on our list. Big power forward, great shot. What really convinced us of him this year was in the second half, his playmaking really got better. So at the beginning of the year, I was like, oof, I don't know, like the skating was always going to be the concern with him, but then the playmaking was not like being really good at the first half of the year. So second half, everything changed. The playmaking became really good, and he's a smart player too. Obviously, the skating is, but when everything else is good, sometimes, you know, you just have to pick your player. And if you watch the NHL playoff, I mean, you need guys like McGorty on your team. He's great inside. He can score from inside. He's got a great shot. He can even score from outside with his shot too. So I'm a big believer in power forward having success in the playoff. And so definitely McGorty was a no-brainer pick for me at this point.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm getting a little bit of like Nick Paul vibes from him with like a big body, can move decent, but maybe not the best straight line skater. Am I way off with that? Because I feel like the way he gets the inside.
Maybe on that sense, but obviously he's a way better talent than Nick Paul.
Right. Does he do it all though?
Yeah. Well, definitely. The skating is only like if he was a good skater, we're talking about possible top 5 pick here. So yeah, see, if he's a great skater, I mean, he's not missing anything really, you know. So yeah, and honestly, the point total at the end doesn't really matter. Look, you guys have the best example in Brady Tkachuk. Like he's not a 80-point guy, but who cares? He does everything, so it doesn't matter at the end.
100%.
Yeah, and Rutger McGorty, he's a guy that we like a lot on this show.
I believe I gave him 5 stars.
Yeah, I think I had him at 4.5, like very high on him for sure. Now, you had him ahead of Cutter Gauthier, a guy that plays kind of a similar game. What's the big difference why you gave him such an edge? I think you have Cutter maybe at 16 and McGroarty at 11.
Yeah, pretty easy answer is the hockey IQ.
Okay.
We think Roger is a really smart hockey player, and Carter has like amazing tools, but maybe the hockey sense for us is a bit more average. But Carter will go higher in the draft. So
that's what it seems like. Yeah.
I'm not like, again, our rankings are not a mock draft.
Yes.
We're looking at in 4 or 5 years who's going to be the better, and we're pretty confident in Roger.
I like that. Rutger McGroarty to the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, I don't like that because we have him going to Montreal here, and he's a player that I'm pretty high on. I would hate to have to go to Montreal, but I understand the pick, and it makes sense for sure as best player available. As you heard Jerome say, 11th on the board at hockeyprospect.com. All right, the Arizona Coyotes. They need a bit of everything. Where did you decide to go with the Arizona Coyotes at 27th overall?
So I stayed with the program. I went with Jimmy Snuggerud. So we have him 12. So again, I might be spreading against the stage to make that pick. Power forward, really good shot. A lot of people talk about his shot, and then it's like, it's great, but his playmaking is even better for me. He sees the ice well. He's smart, and a bit like McGroarty, skating is the question mark here. But I think I saw enough improvement during the year. Like, if you watch him skate at the U18 and you compare that to December, let's say, you can see there's an improvement here. So that's positive. He's going to a good program at Minnesota next year. He's going to play with, Matthew Nyes, Logan Cooley. So they're going to have a really good team next year. So we like him. We like him all year. Honestly, I feel like we almost put him on the map in our first ranking of the year. Nobody really knew him, and we put him top 20 really early on in the season. So we're a big fan.
I like that. Go ahead, Pills.
Yeah, and from my notes, what I was able to see from Snuggerud that really stood out to me is his shot. How would you kind of rank his shot in this draft, and how much of that is a big part of why he's going to go in the first round here?
It's a big part, honestly. If you have to rank his shot, I mean, there's some pretty good shooters in this draft. Lekaramaki is probably number 1. Camel, McGroarty is in there too. So I think if he's not top 5, he's just outside your top 5 of the best shooter in the draft. But I really like his playmaking too. Like, he's smart, he sees the ice well. So I don't know if he's gonna go where we rank him, but I like him enough to definitely pick him at 27. I think that's a pretty good value pick right there.
Is he a guy who skating is the main focus for him into improving into a full-time NHLer?
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's smart, good shot, good passer, competes hard too. Just, again, the skating is the question mark with him. So I think that's why you might see him, like, maybe not go top 20 in the draft. There's a chance of this happening, but he's a good player.
Interesting. And I mean, a team like Arizona can use the time to develop. They've got so many picks in this draft. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see this pick here packaged with one of their seconds or thirds and try to move up a little bit if they have a guy that they like. But obviously having the top 3 pick is a huge cherry on top to a team that has dismantled, I think the only team that's dismantled more than Ottawa over the last 5-6 years. So they're now reaping the benefits. This is pretty much the Arizona Coyotes equivalent of Ottawa's 2020 draft, where you've accumulated all these picks and maybe more. Who knows what's going to happen with Chychrun if it's at the draft or into the summer, whenever it is. This is a huge offseason for Arizona. And in our mock draft day in the first round with Juraj Slafkovsky and Jimmy Snuggerud, that'd be a pretty good haul, in the first round, Jerome?
Yeah, that'd be I mean, they have like 14 draft pick maybe.
It's a lot. Yeah.
There's too much. I mean, even Montreal has too many picks. Yeah,
you have
a pick.
3 firsts and 4 seconds.
Whew.
Yeah.
So you're right.
Yeah,
They're not even leaving the first round. We have the board at 30 right now, but they also have,
they have Colorado's pick from Kemper.
Yeah, from Kemper. There you go. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's 7 picks in the first 2 rounds. That is wild stuff right there for the Arizona Coyotes. So Jimmy Snuggerud goes 27th overall to the Arizona Coyotes. All right, and now we're at 28th overall in our mock draft here at Locked On Senators, and it's the Buffalo Sabres more so pulling the Ottawa Senators of 2020 in terms of having 3 first-round picks. Before we make this pick, Jerome, what are your thoughts on Kamel going at number 9, and then Brad Lambert going in the middle of the second round? I saw he's a little bit lower on your list. Would you have a problem with that based on the skills? Or are you one of those scouts who's just like, I'm out on this player?
I don't mind Camo at 9. Like,
okay,
I think we have him 12, but I mean, it's tough to not like Camo with his skating and his shooting abilities. So, and his season was weird. Like, first month and a half, he was incredible, and then he got hurt, and then he came back, and he was never the same. So, I don't know. Was he lucky? Really, in the first month, like every shot he took went in basically, and then he went back to normal, or really was he like affected by that injury in the second half of the season? I don't know. I know one thing: he can really shoot the puck. He's a good skater, and he's not huge, but man, he competes. So he's not like a soft player. He competes. So I have no issue with him at number 9. Lambert. I would not take him that high. I don't know. He has not been really good in the past 2 years, honestly, and I don't know. I like, he's an incredible skater. Like, he's probably the best skater we've seen since McDavid, maybe.
Wow.
Like, he can fly, but I don't think he's very smart. I don't think he's not a good passer. Got good hands, but like, he can't score for some reason, from any like reason you want to mention. And so, like, he had some decent game at the World Junior, but they were against, like, you know, weaker teams. So I don't know. I wouldn't pick him that high.
So with 28, we're gonna take Gleb Trikazov, who seems like one of the late risers in this draft. Are you sprinting to the podium a third time, Jerome?
Why not?
I'm tired at this
point. Why not? Yeah, well, he's an incredible story, honestly, because if we did a podcast in the first half and you asked me, he'd probably be close to be a no draft for me, because he didn't play well in the first half of the year. Didn't compete. He had maybe one of the worst compete level we saw in the first half. Like, there's some good example of it in the Black Book if people want to read it, but I don't know. So, but we knew he was a talented player, so we couldn't like really like totally, you know, put him aside. So we went back to him in the second half of the year, and then we saw, oh, he's competing now, like really, like pretty well. I saw some really good back check sequence from him. Like, he was eating. I'm like, okay, where was this in the first half? Go ahead. And then his skill level is maybe not as good as anyone, but like, he's pretty on top of the draft as far pure talent. Like, his shot is great. A bit like McGorty, his playmaking really improved in the second half of the year, and his playoff performance was outstanding. They lost in the third round of the NHL playoff. I suggest to whoever fan base that drafts him, go watch those 5 games of that third round. So it's some great hockey, but he is incredible in those 5 games. He kind of like, you know, sold me on his potential in that series. They play against a really tough team. That team they play against, or they could beat a lot of teams in the CHL in Canada. They're huge. Like, they have like some 6'6" giants, 6'7". Like, they're something is up, because like they have so many big forwards. So before that series, I thought, okay, this is the series he's gonna melt down. He's not gonna play well, and he played even better. So that was a really positive, news for me when I watched those 5 games. And on talent alone, he's, you can make a case he's as good as Camo, he's as good as Lekkerimaki. But the first half of the season, it's tough to like totally forget that first half. So it is what it is. I don't know if he's going to go in the first round. Some like regional scout like saw him in the first half, and they might say no draft. I'm not touching him. It's a bit similar thing happened to Matthew Knies last year. He had a really tough start of the year, and some teams just put him aside and they didn't go back on him, and that's why he dropped to like 57 to Toronto when he should have been a top 20 pick. So that happens. If you have a really bad first half, that might happen.
Is he the type of player who's going to stay in Russia, do you think, for a number of years before coming over?
Well, at least for next year, I don't think he has any choice to stay in Russia. But I don't know. I think I used to want like Russian to leave early, but more and more I see example of like, I think it's actually good for Russians to stay in Russia and play in either MHL, VHL, KHL. A lot more, at least for the like Russian player coming to CHL. Like there's not a lot of good example of this working. Like the rate of success is not really high. So I almost prefer if they play like in Russia like another 2-3 years. It's not gonna hurt them. Like at the end of the day, the KHL is either like the second or third best league. So I don't have much issue with it.
Now, the one thing I would ask though is with Trikazov, it's interesting that he got so much MHL playing experience. Typically with the higher end Russian prospects, we see them play a little bit in the VHL and then have a high number of games played in the KHL, but almost no minutes played in the KHL. Danila Yurov.
We call it the Yurov
example.
Minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perfect example of that. So do you think maybe that would stunt his growth a little bit if he ends up going to the KHL but having very limited ice time and very limited minutes? Because we know the coaches over there, they don't care about how the NHL draft goes. They're trying to win the championship. And if it means sitting a 17-year-old superstar for most of the game, then that's what you got to do. But what does that do to a prospect like Trikazov, who you mentioned struggled with compete level? Well, it's going to be hard to compete when you're only getting one shift, period.
Exactly. I mean, it's not like the best case scenario when you have like what happened with Yurov this year. I mean, judging by last year to some like high-end Russians, and they didn't go in KHL this year. A lot of them played in VHL.
Yep.
So I mean, Trikazov started here in the VHL for some reason. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to send him in the VHL, because he was not good at all.
Right.
He only started playing better when he went back to the NHL. It was, I don't know, he looked lost in the VHL, to be honest. And even Miroshnichenko, we might talk about him later on, but he also was like looked lost in the VHL. So it's like it's a men's league. So maybe next year Trikazov plays in the VHL. It really depends what the KHL team want and have on their roster. I have a feeling there will be less import next year in the KHL based on what everything. Yeah. So you might have more like ice time for the young Russians. So we'll see. It's nobody knows, honestly. So just wait and see approach, I guess.
Now, Trikazov, when I watched him and look at some of the highlights and analysis on him, it seems like he is a very typical Russian offensive player. When he has the puck, look out. He can do amazing things, and he's competing. But then off the puck, he's pretty disengaged and not really interested. Do you think that's something that can be coached out over time with him? Or is it one of those cases where it's just like, look, we know he's going to light it up offensively, and we know he's not going to be around defensively. If he's scoring goals, it's not a big issue. Do you think he's going to be able to be one of those types of players, or he's going to have to round out his game a bit?
He's going to have to. He's not going to play in the NHL if he doesn't like compete away from the puck, but he has got much better in the second half of the year. So I don't know like what was going on in the first half, honestly, like, but it was much better in the second half. Or I didn't really have much of an issue with it. Like it's not like that's just Bergeron, obviously.
Yeah.
But like it was good enough for me to not. If it honestly, guys, if it was an issue, he wouldn't be ranked where we rank him. So I mean, you guys know a bit how we work. We love compete level guys. So if you don't compete, you won't be ranked that high. So
that's awesome that he jumped up as much as he did there in your ranking. Still seems, and you told us off air, that likely going to be a day 2 guy, because when you have the Russian factor involved, and then some teams seeing him in the first half and just being like, nope, putting that profile right in the trash. I'm not even going to watch him, because it's not like he's the kind of guy where you'd be scouting someone else and he'd be right there, right in front of you. I don't even know if the Sens have a scout in Russia. They haven't drafted out of Russia since 2005. I probably said that in this draft season. How many times, Pills? It could be a drinking game.
Yeah, a lot of times. Maybe they got Igor Sokolov's brother giving them scouting notes or something like that.
Hey, Tendy, you love to see it. Awesome. Well, there's a little teaser because we do have another Russian coming up, but we're going back to the U.S. program for the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers have been looking for complementary pieces that can make impacts at the NHL level since their 2 superstars really emerged at the top. But we're going with another shooter here from the program. There's a ton of shooters, from the program this year. Ike Howard, or Isaac Howard, whichever one you want to go with. What makes him a good fit for the Edmonton Oilers? Why do you have him here?
Well, I feel like he's a pretty good value at 29 for the Oilers. I think people are really mixed on him. Like some really like him and some are a bit like lower on him. We're kind of like in the middle. I've been around 20 on the list, I believe. Like you said, he's a shoot first type player. But one thing I'll say about him, since he came to the program 2 years ago, his playmaking has really improved. Like he was known as good skater, shoot first, and that was it. And now he has like added like a playmaking value to his game. So that's a really positive sign going forward with him. The thing with him that might make him drop a bit is he's not he's about like 5'9", 180. So he's not a tall guy, and maybe his skating is like it's good, but maybe not super good for his size. You wish he had like another gear in his skating. So maybe that's might make him drop a bit. And his play away from the puck sometimes is a bit, you wish he was a bit better. Wish he competed a bit harder away from the puck. But, at 29, man, I think he always get a pretty solid player right there.
Yeah, we like Isaac Howard a lot on this show. I think I gave him 4 stars in my rating. And Scott Wheeler even mentioned that he thinks he could be a top 10 type talent. It's just he needs to work on a couple areas of his game, just with that shot and the playmaking ability. Like, how good offensively can this guy be? Do you feel like he's a guy that can drive a line offensively?
A play driver? Probably not. I think he's going to need like a good center to play with him.
Like a Logan Cooley? That's who he had at the program, didn't he? Or was he more with Nazar? They kind of mix up the lines a bit.
Yeah, they have 3 lines that they're like going they mix like those 2 lines pretty well during the year. Like, I mean, their third line at U, I think, was probably the best line of the tournament with McGorty, Stramel, and Lucius. So that team was stacked. So, but yeah, I don't know if I see him as a play driver, but I see him as a pretty middle 6 type forward for me. If everything goes well, I think he can be a good second line player, and maybe he's more a third line player at the end. We'll see. Will depends on his next 2-3 years how he does in college.
100%. So there it is for the Edmonton Oilers. Isaac Howard, who is going to the University of Minnesota Duluth and joining Scott Sandelin's team there in the NCAA. HC. Now, to round it out, going from Edmonton to Winnipeg, their second first-round pick. We've already added Connor Geekie in the middle of the first round, and now this seems like an enormous home run swing near the end of the first round because Ivan Miroshnichenko was a top 5 pick by some scouts as recently as the start of this season. Of course, there's the Hodgkin's lymphoma, the off-ice inability to be present on the ice, and it sounds like it's in remission. It's great. We love to hear that. And as a scout, how do you take that into account? Is it just like any other injury where if they miss a year, you just lose that development time?
Well, yeah, somewhat. I mean, the news we heard that he got the green light to come back next year, so that's obviously very positive.
Yeah.
Honestly, I made the pick just based on what we have on our list, and like the news were positive on his side, and I don't know. He had a really weird draft season. So he had a good Ilinka. Then he went to the VHL, and then we mentioned I thought he looked lost there.
Okay.
There's a lack of compete. Didn't really play like smart hockey. Like I often mention the playmaking value. His playmaking value was awful. So I was like, wow, he can't. So I thought maybe he was going to be a play driver. That was gone. He's not a play driver. So yeah, like I don't know why they sent him to the VHL, to be honest. Like he didn't even dominate the NHL last year. So it was a bit weird to me. So in this case, like he played great in 2 different parts of the season. There was a November tournament, U20, where he actually outplayed Yurov. But Yurov made the World Junior team. And then in January, just before he left, he played his best hockey in January, just before he left, which is weird. I thought I might be in the opposite. Yeah. So in January, he showed more playmaking, more like play smarter. And obviously the skating is really good. The shot is really good. He's like a little bulldog on the ice. Like he's not soft. And he goes to the net. So there's a lot of good quality, but I was really impressed with his playmaking in January. That gave me hope that, okay, maybe we're getting like that player back. But obviously we miss, 3-4 months of action. So there's a lot of question mark next to his name. But, there's enough potential there at 30 to take a shot at him. I don't know if that's going to happen with the Jets. I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if he goes in round 1, to be honest, with everything going on. But we'll see.
I bet he's just going to go to Tampa in the second round, become Kucherov, and everyone's just going to look so dumb for not taking him before.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I can already see it. Pillsy, anything on him?
Yeah, so it's interesting with him versus Trikazov is he, as you mentioned, played a lot more in the VHL. Do you think this is the kind of scenario where it didn't really work for him in the VHL? Let's get him back in the MHL, because the season before he only had 20 games in the MHL, which isn't much time. And obviously, if it's not working up against men, you got to try something different. But do you think that he'll dominate too easily down there? Because he's a guy that his shot is incredible. Like he was beating goalies from a long range. So maybe it would just be too easy for him. Like where does he really fit for next year's development?
No, I don't think going back to MHL is going to be a good idea for him at this point. Like he played the most of the year in the VHL, and like he might get some game in MHL next year, but there's a lot of time what happens with Russian prospects. They'll go back and forth between the VHL and MHL. Let's say they're in the VHL, but they don't have any games for like a week. They might send them MHL to play like 2 or 3 games. Yeah, so I think VHL, him and Trikazov, like I'm guessing will be in the VHL full time next year, but we'll see. You never know in Russia. I mean, both of them are on the same team, so. I mean, are they both going to play in the KHL at the same time? I don't know about that. So I don't know. Maybe one of them will play KHL and the other one VHL. Who knows?
Would you call this a successful first round for the Jets if they leave with Connor Geekie and Ivan Miroshnichenko? Sorry.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Geekie, we had him really high at the beginning of the year, but I don't know. The second half of the season kind of scared us a bit. And the skating, the puck handling were kind of I don't know. We always make like projection with players. Like that's scouting. Scouting is all about projection. Sometimes your projection has to change, and so in D case that was it. But if you get in mid first, I don't know if you can complain. And Miroshnichenko at 30, if he pans out, you'll be pretty happy with that pick.
And I feel like for the Jets, like they're constantly having things fall in their lap, like Perfetti, Chaz Lucius, and then if they get Geekie, like it's guys that have all this talent, but other teams maybe that's not their guy. And then Winnipeg says, "Well, we can't leave this guy on the board," and they take him. So they could really be
still crazy. Like that draft was awesome, but
it's insane. Yeah, it's insane they got him there. And even Chaz Lucius, it's pretty crazy to me that he fell all the way there. Ross, when the Sens were announcing their draft pick, we thought for sure that it was
from the US
Chaz.
and TDP.
We're like, okay, we're getting Chaz Lucius. Like, okay, here we go. Things took a turn there, but that's okay. So I think this pick makes a lot of sense for the Jets, especially after getting Geekie already. Then it's like, okay, we've got some sure things here in Perfetti and Lucius. Geekie, that'll be a bit of a project, but then with this guy here, we can really take a swing. And if it takes him longer, and that's fine.
Yeah, give him the Artemi Panarin treatment, eh?
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. Honestly, even Kyle Connor was a bit of a. We had him 5th. He went 18?
Yeah, he did because it was a part of the 3 in a row. Barzal,
Boston
Connor, and Shabbat.
Yeah, I know. What a pick.
Yeah, that turned out to be a really good pick. And I always loved. I lived in Halifax. Well, Nikolai Ehlers was there too, and hell of a player there. They got it 9th overall. It was pretty much him or Nylander. Yeah. Take your pick your poison there. Jerome, we really appreciate you doing this. I want to ask you about the best player remaining on your board at hockeyprospect.com. Again, the Black Book is available everywhere. And the Senators love the friendship tour. They take guys who have relationships, but we also like when our superstar can have his countrymen involved. Tell us about Julian Lutz, because we haven't covered him at all in the process, and you guys have him in the first round.
Oh, yeah. I guess we love German players at hockeyprospect.com because we had Sider 10, we had Stutzla number 2. We had
those are looking good right now.
Yeah. And we had, Reichel went pretty high. We had Pertica pretty high, but not high enough after what he showed me this year. But yeah, Lutz, unfortunately, he played at Terlinka, and he played 1 or 2 exhibition games back home, and then he got hurt. He missed. He only came back in February. So he missed 75% of his draft year. And, he missed all this time, comes back in the DL against man's pretty good league. And it's it's a tough way to start your year in February after not playing for 6-7 months. So his DL viewing were up and down, but we like him last year. So we saw him play last year and we had a lot of times for him. He's good size player, skates really well. He's physical. He's got a good shot. He had a really good game against Canada at the U18. So we like him enough to be in our top 32. And I think he has a chance to be maybe a second line player, maybe more a middle 6 type. But he missed a lot of time, so he's gonna have to play a lot. Next year, and I'm guessing he's going to stay in DL next year. But we like the talent, honestly. The skating for his size is really, really good. So,
for more, you can go check him out on Twitter at Jerome_Berube and hockeyprospect.com. They've got a top 112 skaters and 4 goalies. I'm so upset at the lack of quality in the goalie prospect. We're a goalie-friendly show, Jerome. Is 2023 going to be better?
I think so.
You got some goalies coming?
can't be worse than 2022, honestly.
Is this like the worst goalie prospect pool that we've seen in years?
I think so. Honestly, we work so hard to find goalies. Like, even our number one ranked goalie is not ranked anywhere. Nobody knows him. Like, he's like
I don't think I heard of him either.
Yeah. It's our goalie guy, Brad Allen.
He's enormous.
He's huge.
Two of the goalies here are 233 pounds. Woo.
They say hockey prospect is biased with size, so I guess we're biased with size for goalie too. But yeah, their number one goalie is 6'6", 234.
Yeah.
And then there's another one who's really huge too.
Yeah, so, Tobias Leinonen.
Yeah. But this one was a surprise because I didn't think he was that heavy. Like, all year he was listed at 6'5", 180. And then he gets to the combine, he's 6'5",
wow.
He's 6'5", 230. I'm like, okay.
How much did he eat before that weigh-in? He's carb loading or something.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, he didn't look like he was like out of shape or anything like that. So I guess his size during the year was just not updated. So, not a good class for goalie, honestly.
No, it's sad, man. We just want to represent some goalies. We had 2 in the first round last year. You had Askarov in 2020, and then 2019. We love the Great Dane, Matt Sogard, friend of the show, and we've also got an affinity now for Kochetkov, who just absolutely kills anyone who comes in his crease. So I absolutely love that. And Spencer Knight was all right, too.
Yeah. Fair.
No, unless he's playing the Sens in Sunrise, 8 past night. But no, Jerome, this is awesome, and we got to get you on later this summer. We'll talk just about the Sens prospect pool, how they added to it within this draft, and a whole lot more. So we really appreciate you taking some time today.
All right, thanks, guys.
So there you have it, 1 through 30. 1 through 30 are complete on this ginormous feature that is the Locked On Senators complete first round mock draft. But Pilsy, where are the Colorado Avalanche and Tampa Bay Lightning? Now, Colorado doesn't even have their own pick. It's Arizona, but we don't even know who's where.
Yeah, Ross, at time of recording, it is still ongoing, the Stanley Cup final. So we don't know who's picking where. So we thought, you know what, we're not going to mess around with the mock draft where we don't know where teams are picking. So the final picks, pick 31 and pick 32, are going to be pending for now.
Up to your imaginations. You know what? Leave a comment if you're watching this far. I want to know that you made it this far.
Yeah,
we're putting the chapters in. You made it. You're
Congrats.
here. We're here. We made it. Pilsy, high five right across the screen. That was unbelievable.
Boom.
This is quite the project we put together. We're over 3.5 hours of draft content. And if you're watching this the weekend it comes out, next week and the week after, some of these voices you got to hear and their insight onto certain players, we're doing complete interviews. So thank you so much to Russ Cohen, to Derek Lee, to Cam Robinson, to Scott Wheeler, to Tony Ferrari, to Jerome Berube. Pilsy, it takes a village, and it really did, because we wouldn't have been able to do this without the great insight that our insiders brought us.
Yeah, it's awesome that they were willing to give us this time, because as we know, this is the busiest time for these folks right now. So for them to give us even 10, 15 minutes would have been great, but most of them are above half an hour worth of time. So that is awesome. And this is one of the craziest videos we've ever done. This is strictly a Locked On Senators thing. This isn't a Locked On Podcast Network thing. We just thought, you know what, our first mock draft where we just did 10 picks, people were so into that. We've covered 64 different prospects. Let's keep it going. Why stop the train now? We got momentum. We got all our friends of the show on here, and this has been an absolute blast to do.
Not all of them, though, Pilsy. We got Craig Button's going to come on after the Sens make their picks.
Yes, yeah. Craig, we like having him kind of evaluate how things have shaken out, and that's it's always fun to chat with Craig, so we'll get him back for sure.
100%. Well, let's do a bit of a best of the rest, since we cut the hose off early a little bit here at 30. There's still 2 more picks until the end of the official first round. So what we did is our draft rankings, which again, they're now out. And on Monday, so Monday, June 27th, Pilsy and I are going to release our own personal list I'm doing a top 50 that I'm going to put out in written form, but on Locked On Senators, we're going to discuss a few of the differences that we have in player evaluation throughout this whole process. But Pilsy, what we did with our amalgamated ranking is we put together a chart, shocker, and then as each player was selected, I took them out. So right here, we have the best remaining players in terms of Locked On Senators average. I'd say we did pretty well then with the average, Pills? Because we let our guests decide, and there's only 3 picks that are left who we had in the top 30.
Although, Ross, I'm noticing something funny right now. There is one player that we have here that was taken, and
yes.
Classic Locked On Senators, we just disregarded the Leafs pick. Jagger Firkus. Whoop. Get out of here, get on down to Toronto. So there's a lot of great talent left here. There's some guys that I'm looking at right now, Ross, that I would be very excited if I was either the Arizona Coyotes or Tampa Bay Lightning, and these players are still available. Do you want me to start with my top guy that I would probably go with here, or how do you want to do this?
Let's say it's Arizona, because that would mean you and I are very rich men betting on the Lightning in the final. Shout out to Bet Online. We appreciate all of our sponsors here. And thanks for sitting through some YouTube ads. It does go a long way for us. Yes, let's pretend Arizona's 31st. So we are going to finish the mock draft after all.
Classic. All right, we've gone too long. We're gonna stop. No. We're gonna keep going. So stick around if you're still here. If you're still alive at this point throughout this, you probably run out of snacks. Your alcohol is empty. Hopefully
unless you're Stewie. Stewie's got the bourbon going.
Yeah, but he only brings out the best for this. So we'll see if he's got any top shelf stuff left here. And hopefully you did the LOSP bingo, because you could have got bingo 1,000 times over throughout this feature film. Thank you,
for sure.
That. So my pick for the Arizona Coyotes is going to be Seamus Casey, right-hand shot defenseman from guess where? The program, of course. But a Miami hockey player, that's always interesting. So he's not going to have any problems going to ASU for a while. He's used to that. And you got a right-hand shot defenseman here that is committed to the University of Michigan. He's the kind of guy that you want starting with the puck in your own zone. He's very good at the breakout. He's able to avoid pressure with good skating. I think it's very likely that Chychrun will not be a part of the Coyotes organization in the future, so they got to start shoring up that defense there. So I think Seamus Casey makes a lot of sense for the Arizona Coyotes at pick, we're saying pick 31, so let's go with that.
You know what? I think they take a defenseman, but I'm going to say Calle Odelius. I think that he just brings that mobile package in a big frame. Might not be the most offensive-minded defenseman, but it takes all types. And for me, I think that he would be a nice, solid pick who's going to take 2-3 years to develop before he reaches the NHL. And that's realistically when Arizona's window will open.
Yeah, they're not in a rush.
No. Exactly. So you get him in the mix. I think that we're both on the right track with people who are going to be a little bit of projects, of a little bit more of a long-term development. Now, this pains me because in a perfect world, he's available for the Ottawa Senators at 39, but I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning would grab Owen Beck here at 32.
Owen Beck is one of your top guys. Was he a 5-star guy for you? I think he might have been your first 5-star guy, Ross.
That's why he's bolded, actually. I forgot to unbold that 39 there, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be a great pick. So that's your kind of bias pick. I'll go with my bias pick, and we're going to the Guelph Storm, Danny Zhilkin.
Sure.
This guy, he's got a lot of talent. He's a Russian that's been playing in the OHL for a while. He was great.
But he represents Canada too, right?
Yes, he does. Yeah, he was born in Moscow, however, and obviously with his last name, you can tell he's a pass-shoot threat with good size. Some of his highlights are just nasty to watch. He's able to play with top players like Sasha Pastujov of the Guelph Storm Anaheim Ducks pick. So I think he would fit in great in the Tampa Bay organization. Kind of like a Matthew Joseph, maybe someone that will start lower in the lineup. But hey, if you need him to play with Stamkos, Kucherov for a shift or two, he can hang with the big boys. So I think for Tampa, you want someone that can move up and down your lineup and can play with skilled top-tier talent players. So I think Zhilkin is going to make a lot of sense in Tampa.
100%. Now, Pillsy, we're going to keep this up because I want you to pick your 2 players here that are maybe a little bit lower. Let's start at Sam Rinzel, who I think might more in the first round. It's kind of like a show me pick. Like, I can fix this guy just a little bit more and he's going to be perfect. He's big. He's mobile. He has all the tools. Let me just put them all. Let me buy him a toolbox and put them all in and develop this guy properly. But at 39, who are you hoping the Senators go for? I definitely stopped scrolling because I saw him.
Ross, I am banging on the table. I'm calling Pierre Dorion. I'm calling Trent Mann. You have to take Ty Nelson here. Like, come on. That is my guy. Ty Nelson, right-hand shot defenseman. Yes, he's only 5'10", but do not call Ty Nelson a small defenseman because he weighs 196 pounds. He is an absolute beast, and he plays with that strength. He's the ultimate power play quarterback. He's got a big shot. He's got great vision. And I know it's the meathead hockey fan of me, but you got to watch that highlight where he scores a goal by splitting the puck into. The vibes are off the chart. His hair is absolutely wild. I think he'd be a great character in the room. Ty Nelson is my guy at pick 39. Let's go.
Right shot defenseman. I'm going with the left shot defenseman. Another undersized guy, Lane Hudson. Absolutely electric hands. Patience at the blue line. He's unbelievably poised. And, buddy, he's got those growth plates that still are those of a 16-year-old. So he is going to grow. He's like 5'7", 5'8" right now. You're not going to play at the NHL at that size, but I do believe he'll get up to 5'10". And if he hits that magical 5'10", he's going to be money at the next level. So I'm hoping for Lane Hudson. And then just quickly, Pillsy, pick 62. I've got two options here for the Ottawa Senators. One, Isaiah George from the London Knights, big, smooth defenseman, real nice. And he could be gone by then, but again, hockeyprospect.com was the only person who rated him as high as they did. Julian Lutz, I think, would be a great guy to go and make an impact for. You heard Jerome say he was hurt until February. I would love the Sens to go out there and grab Julian Lutz if he's available at the end of the second round.
Yeah, and I'd never even heard of Lutz before this, so that's definitely very interesting. It would be great to get Timmy a country mate, as we're still kind of...
We got some butchered German on the team with Norris and Batherson.
Yeah, we could do better than that. I'm still a little sad they didn't go JJ Peterka in the other draft. I think that would have been great. But yeah, Lutz is a good choice here. Ross, my guy, and I thought maybe this was going to be one of the two you were going with. I wouldn't mind the Sens taking a look at Rieger Lorenz from Okotoks Oilers. Had him at 4 stars. He was one of the guys early on in our draft rankings that I finally was like, yeah, I see a lot in this kid.
I know.
And he's going to University of Denver. He puts up points in a big way. He was the Rookie of the Year in the 2022 AJAHL. So I think he's a great player, and he's got good value for that second round pick.
Yeah, I got a text from a source. I know that you know who I'm talking about, and they said there's no way that you can have this guy as a top 50 guy. So we'll see. Maybe that makes you like him more.
Sends him. Yeah, we'll send him with that.
We'll send him with that one. Perfect. Another name we just wanted to bring up because we didn't profile him at all, but we know the Sens interviewed him, and he's from Gatineau. Noah Warren, 6'5", left shot defenseman, right shot defenseman. Ooh. So premium position, but steady, stay at home. Like, in a perfect world, you're looking at him as a guy who maybe he ends up being like a big sell, like a big physical presence, defensive defenseman, but probably doesn't have the same upside offensively. I just wanted to get that name in there before we wrapped up because we know the Sens, their scouts like to look at the local angle too. So I think he could be an option, a member of the Gatineau Olympique, and Tristan Luneau's teammate, a guy who we're also pretty high on as a right shot defenseman. So Pilsy, congrats, buddy. This was an unbelievable experience going through all this. We hope that the listener, the viewer, really gets to take something away from this in terms of getting a multitude of opinions, not just ours. Yes. We've preached what we thought for each of these players throughout our profiles. If I have the time, I'm going to go through and put the cards to each guy so you can click on the profile if you go through it. But Pilsy, this was wild. This was wild.
This was crazy, yeah. And I feel like I wish we would have planned this, Ross. I feel like we need to put some sort of Easter egg in this part of the video for all the fans that ended up listening all the way. They get like a little treat or something. But I got nothing planned here. So
reply to the tweet at Sens Central when I put it out. Reply to the tweet at Sens Central. #GoSensGo when you get to this part. And we will pick one winner
Ooh.
We're going to think of something.
Okay, I was like, this is happening on the fly. Let's see what he comes up with here.
I mean, we can definitely offer them to be the next Send Central citizen. 100%, because we're going to get back to that. But
if you listen to almost 4 hours of us, you can probably hang as a Send Central citizen in one of our episodes. So yes, that's fair.
All right, Pilsy. So we are about 2 weeks away from the NHL draft when this video is released. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments if you did. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. And that concludes our entire first round mock draft right here from your friends at Locked On Senators.